Introduction. I Must Break You. This book can be a catalyst for your transformation into the man you've always wanted to become. The journey will involve a study of consciousness, mindfulness meditation, and how to naturally attract desirable women into your life. Core confidence, contagious positivity, masculine rhythm, and developing an emotional immune system. These are just some of the themes we'll explore in depth. There's one key first principle that can make all the difference. To varying degrees, most of us suffer from a health issue of the mind. Understanding and fixing this flaw in the way our conscious mind operates can trigger upgrades to our personality. The roadmap is clear in the chapters ahead, and the path is well trodden. You need to decide if this journey of conquering your mind and masculinity is a worthwhile investment. How much time would such a transformation take? My journey, from a lonely and painfully shy introvert into the man I always wanted to become, took more than a decade. But I squandered so much time trying to needlessly improve the superficial aspects of my character without looking deeper, much deeper. Instead, your journey could be measured in months if you apply the principles of this book. It all comes down to how badly we want it and how willingly we can let go and enjoy the process. 15 years ago, I was imprisoned inside my own mind and knew I needed to make a change. I mostly recall miserable loneliness and no small measure of desperation to find a woman, to be honest, any woman, to form an emotional and physical connection with. Professionally, I was co-founder of an IT company, but the soul-destroying hours trapped in front of a computer screen left little time for dating. I recall my life consisted of frequent burnouts from workaholism, the loneliness of a stranded techno castaway, and chronic insomnia. In the following years, I gradually overcame many of my social anxieties. I became something of a self-help junkie, attending weekend transformation courses and dating boot camps designed to better my opportunities with women and work. I also traveled and lived in Central and South America, which gave me a more worldly perspective on life. However, something wasn't right. Underneath it all, I felt I was simply optimizing a coping strategy rather than breaking through to true fulfillment. All this said, I sometimes felt I possessed an alter ego that was much more interesting and attractive than regular me, and on occasion I'd unleash him upon the world, usually when under the influence of alcohol. It was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. When hanging out with sober Henrik, he'd make the conversation about you and what you wanted to talk about. You wanted to talk about football? Sure, I'd nod encouragingly in all the right places as you blathered on, even though I had very little interest in the topic. But if you gave me a couple of beers, suddenly my attitude would pivot. I'd stop trying to please you with my listening skills. Instead, my personality would turn sprightly and roguish, and my attitude would be one of, look at me, I'm the captain now. A famous Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde themed movie is Fight Club, directed by David Fincher and based on the novel written by Chuck Palahniuk. It's the ultimate exploration of the good, the bad, and the insane of masculinity. There are many deep themes within Fight Club, such as male frustrations with modern living, the pursuit of purpose, and the nihilism of anti-masculine modernity. But the most compelling element of the story is the contrast between the two main characters, Brad Pitt as Tyler Durden and Edward Norton as the narrator. When it premiered in 1999, Fight Club instantly became the most controversial film of the year. One particularly powerful moment of the movie comes when Tyler Durden, the protagonist cum antagonist of Fight Club, rants the advice I should have embraced during my long years of attempted self-improvement. While driving in a car with the narrator and two of their minions, Tyler lets go of the steering wheel and allows the car to drift out of control. When the narrator begins freaking out, Tyler cuts him off. Look at you. You're fucking pathetic. Why do you think I blew up your condo? Hitting bottom isn't a weekend retreat. It's a goddamn seminar. Stop trying to control everything and just let go. Let go. After the car crashes, Tyler drags the narrator from the wreckage and laughing maniacally, says, "God damn, we just had a near-life experience." In Fight Club, Edward Norton's portrayal of the narrator is an outwardly hard-working, non-confrontational, agreeable kind of guy. But as was shown behind the facade, insomnia, resulting from a profound dissatisfaction with his life, has made him miserable and desperate. He is neurotic, trapped in a state of incessant internal dialogue and imaginative escapism. Edward Norton's character is a poster boy for weakness and imprisonment of mind. Tyler, on the other hand, is a very different beast. During the big reveal that both men are one and the same person, Tyler explains, "You were looking for a way to change your life. You could not do this on your own. All the ways you wished you could be, that's me. I look like you want to look. I fuck like you want to fuck. I'm smart, capable, and most importantly, I'm free in all the ways that you are not." The narrator finds a radical way to change his life, and that solution is to become Tyler Durden, a dangerous madman. However, looking beyond the dark ideology, we can still appreciate Brad Pitt's portrayal of authentic confidence and his zero fucks given, live in the moment attitude. He communicates congruently and powerfully, fully aligned with his masculinity. His charismatic bad boy energy certainly makes for a very compelling on-screen character. In Tyler and the narrator, Chuck Palahniuk created characters who were polar opposites inside the mind of the same man. I can relate a lot to Edward Norton's character in Fight Club. Like the narrator, my psychological suffering and imprisonment was, in hindsight, completely self-inflicted. It was a learned helplessness and resignation, a reaction to the feedback that women and society were giving me. If I'd had a roadmap showing me how to break out of that loneliness, I would have seized the opportunity. If I'd held this book in my hands 15 years ago and embraced its principles, I would have avoided so much suffering, not only in my dating life, but in literally every other aspect of my life as well. Finally, in 2014, the inevitable crash happened. I experienced a devastating nervous breakdown. As my company found more financial success, I found myself increasingly at the mercy of the relentless whims of our customers. During that summer, after dealing with a particularly bullying customer, I buckled under the pressure. Very suddenly, any attempt to concentrate on a customer-pleasing task brought about an immediate and paralyzing anxiety attack. 4 weeks after, even simple daily tasks were a struggle. The transition from a hustling professional warrior to an emotional train wreck was rapid. When you've overdosed on the body's stress hormone, cortisol, enough times, you begin seeing the world in terms of a persistent, ongoing crisis that only you can solve, if only you had the strength of mind to solve it. I tearfully told my business partner that I wasn't sure if I could ever continue. I emailed my colleagues, who were dependent on my knowledge, that I was taking an immediate and indefinite leave of absence. I then barricaded myself inside my apartment and proceeded to drink myself into oblivion for 3 days and nights straight without leaving. On the first day, I drank a 70-centiliter bottle of Bulgarian home-produced rakia that had been given to me as a gift. At more or less 60% ABV, the giver had warned this beverage was essentially a derivative of Soviet-era rocket fuel. I have no recollection of what I drank on the following days. At the time, this was the only escape from the outside world that my desperate mind could muster. Although I've never had and never will have suicidal thoughts, my business partner nevertheless flew from Denmark, where he and our team were based, down to Bulgaria out of concern for my well-being. At least my timing was impeccable. My summer holiday was already booked for a couple of weeks later, a trip to India, and checking into a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat in Chennai. Going to India to find spiritual peace may sound cliché, but this turned out to be exactly the intervention I needed. For 10 whole days, no one from the outside world could reach me. It was a tough retreat, sitting for 11 hours a day in silent meditation, as the mosquitoes feasted on me, but it proved to be a wonderful reset after my complete burnout. Meditating to build mental strength is analogous to going to the gym to build physical strength. In fact, mental strength can be built faster than muscle strength. And during those 10 days, I had the opportunity to gain strength and regain some perspective. One pivotal moment came during the middle of the retreat. We were challenged to do a grueling form of meditation called strong determination sitting, or Adithana. The goal was to meditate continuously for 2 hours with no movement. Maintaining stillness is a particular weakness of mine in meditation, as I find prevention of movement unbearably claustrophobic. I was already freaking out after about 15 minutes. There was a significant amount of what I felt was physical pain because my posture had quickly become uncomfortable. After 30 minutes or so, my mind was engaged in a full-on civil war within itself. Almost all the forces of my being were resisting the meditation, a howling storm of amplified physical and emotional pain that desperately wanted to sabotage the session. There was just one lone champion that held on against the crescendo, whose conviction was that if we could conquer this, then we could conquer pretty much anything. And suddenly, my mind broke, completely surrendered, and the resistance collapsed into nothing. The torrid storm was instantly replaced with a pervasive, all-consuming peace. The stillness was wonderful, both embracing and expansive. I felt it was supercharged healing. I likened that state to bathing in the fountain of youth for the mind. Miraculously, even the physical pain was gone. Objectively, I knew my back ached and my knees pressed against the floor were still causing some discomfort, but my mind was detached and merely observing the sensations, effortlessly equanimous. That was a key moment of realization. The distinction between pain and suffering was blindingly obvious. Physical pain is nerve impulses responding to noxious stimuli. Suffering is a creation of the mind and entirely optional. This sublime tranquility lasted for another 30 minutes or so before the resistance reasserted itself, and I struggled again for the final hour. Nevertheless, this breaking of the mind concept and the stark distinction between pain and suffering was a thrilling revelation. My resisting mind has surrendered to my determination countless times since then. Sometimes, when I sit down to meditate, I think of the 80s Rocky IV movie, when the menacing Ivan Drago looks down upon Rocky Balboa before the fight and tells him, with calm certainty, "I must break you." In the months after returning home, I was in a completely different headspace. The stress was a distant memory. I cleaned up my lifestyle with daily meditation, a nutritious diet, and a regular gym habit. My newfound sense of balance was invigorating. I was suddenly dating and sleeping with women who were significantly more attractive than in previous years. I lucked out when on a shopping boulevard, I approached and began chatting with 2 identical twin sisters. I knew I'd struck gold, as they immediately responded encouragingly to my flirtation. I made teasing accusations that compared the more fashionably dressed twin unfavorably with her sister. A few minutes into the conversation, they were already squabbling for my attention. I could only take one of their numbers, but I was still more than happy. Gary became my winter girlfriend that year. I recall she had a thing about trying to impress me with stories about men who'd she'd rejected when they attempted to offer her expensive gifts. The only thing I offered her was my newfound equanimity, the calm, non-reactivity I discovered during my retreat, and my contagious positivity. This success can't be solely credited to the retreat, as I'd done years of essential self-development before that, but it was a very significant catalyst to finally unleashing those lessons. I credit my breakdown and the subsequent rebuilding during the retreat as a pivotal early moment in my journey towards fully realizing my authentic masculinity. This is the crux of the challenge and the call to action for which Masculine Meditations was written. How do we transition from the learned helplessness of Fight Club's The Narrator to a thriving positivity version of our own innate Tyler Durden? How do we unleash an inner Buddha badass that women find attractive? Mindfulness meditation is a key component, but this is a very generic term, and not all meditation methods under this banner are equal. What we require is a very specific kind of meditation and approach to life that will transform our interior and exterior world. There's a single foundational first principle that will help us understand how we can make this transformation. I've called this principle right-mindedness. It has a very specific meaning for the way we perceive and behave in the world. It affects our confidence, our equanimous self-expression, our positivity, and ultimately our strength of mind. Developing this fundamental skill from novice to mastery is the journey towards becoming a right-minder. The principle of the right-minder will be revealed soon enough, but first we'll meet a real-life Godfather of Fun version of Tyler Durden. He was my early mentor and inspiration, a man of natural right-mindedness and the single greatest seducer of women I've ever met. Chapter 1, The Godfather of Fun. We each choose our own adventure in life. If we're fortunate, we find mentors along the way. These are great men who've gone before us and can help us navigate the perilous road ahead. In 2008, I became addicted to self-development courses and learning everything I could from dating coaches. As addictions go, it wasn't the worst I could have chosen, but it was certainly expensive. I invested all my spare money into these courses. On dating boot camps alone, I spent tens of thousands of dollars, excluding travel, accommodation, and lifestyle expenses. These were weekend courses hosted by pickup artists, high-ranking members of the seduction community, a subculture of men that aspired to unlock the secrets of seduction. During the day in classrooms, they'd teach us the theory of dating and what women wanted. In the evenings, the class of several students would then hit the bars and clubs to try to talk to as many women as possible. When a horde of classroom-taught, aspiring seducers suddenly hit the club, things got weird. During one such boot camp in Atlanta, hosted by one of the world's most prominent pickup artists of the time, I was the only student to bring a woman back to my hotel room. This was the benchmark for success. It was to be my first ever one-night stand, my holy grail aspiration. As a guy who grew up deep in the English farming countryside, that this success would come in a major American city was all the more exhilarating, but it all went wrong when she discovered my course notes on the bedroom table. I hadn't even bothered to hide the notes, because I didn't truly believe I could bring a girl back. Entitled Night Game, the notes revealed the game plan for rapid seduction. She did somewhat forgive me, but her attitude turned derisive, and my sense of masculinity crashed. "Am I your night game?" she chided between snorts of laughter. The evening became even more humiliating when, both naked and despite her best efforts to turn me on, my performance anxiety struck. I was thwarted at the last hurdle. At the end of it, I was miserable, and she was less than satisfied by how her medicine degree graduation party had concluded. That was seduction community game for newbies in a nutshell, a roller coaster of the highest highs and the lowest lows. Considering the intensity of my natural introversion back then, I marvel at my courageousness. I learned a lot, but it was also humiliating. I had the unshakable feeling of being creepy, and it was horrendously expensive. There had to be a better way. 18 months after my initial introduction to the seduction community, I packed up my life in Europe and moved to Latin America. The fallout from the 2008 financial crisis was raging, and my business partner and I chose to delegate the responsibilities of our business to others. We declared ourselves to be semi-retired in our early 30s, and for the next couple of years, we enjoyed the good life. We traveled and partied extensively, including a North American road trip, several carnivals in South America, and many expeditions on the volcanoes of Central America. That fortunate situation would prove to be unsustainable in the long run, but for a couple of years, I reveled in a lifestyle far removed from the office treadmill. In 2009, I met a natural, a man naturally good with women, whose game I considered to be superior to all those pickup artists. The catalyst came in February 2009 when my wingman, Mr. Anderson, invited me to join him in Guatemala. The goal was to pursue the female tourists of Antigua. I was immediately sold on the idea. Mr. Anderson was renting a room in the house of a man named Victor, who, he claimed, was a master seducer. Victor was in his early 40s, an Alabamian expat living in Guatemala. My wingman assured me that it was neither Victor's looks nor his money that made him exceptionally good at connecting with women. The pitch was simple. We'd rent rooms in Victor's house and learn everything we could from him. Mr. Anderson, with his deeper voice, innate assertiveness, and good looks, was already getting far better results than me. Any man that my wingman was in awe of had to be on another level. Eagerly, like a determined novice en route to meet a great master, I purchased my ticket and jetted off to the Central American town. Antigua is a vibrant colonial town surrounded by 3 volcanoes: the imposing Volcán de Agua, the majestic Volcán de Ekāyana-magga, and its tempestuous twin, Volcán de Fuego. Fuego is still very much active and frequently belches plumes of ash hundreds of meters into the sky. Antigua was founded by Spanish conquistadors, and we had arrived to conquer. In addition to being my new landlord, Victor was also the founder and lead guide of the Volcano Tourism Company, whose house was also a storefront for that business. I wasn't able to meet Victor on the evening of my arrival. My wingman explained that when he'd left the house to meet me, Victor had been entertaining 3 women, 2 Swiss and a Norwegian. My wingman admitted that he was grateful to have had the excuse that he was going to come to meet me because, despite his best efforts, none of the 3 women would give him much attention. They were all completely fixated on Victor and competing for his attention. When I met Victor the following afternoon, he immediately put me into spectator mode as he told us of his exploits of the previous evening. Victor and the 3 women had all slept together, enjoying a group orgy in the master bedroom of his crumbling colonial house. As Victor recounted the story, I was already comparing him to Fight Club's Tyler Durden. The women were tourists who had arrived back from one of Victor's volcano expeditions the previous morning. There were other volcano guiding tourism businesses in Antigua, but they mostly employed local Guatemalan guides and significantly lacked the coolness factor of Victor's team of native English-speaking alpha guides. Whereas my wingman and I only knew how to meet people in bars and clubs, Victor and his small posse of trekking guides had inadvertently created an industrial conveyor belt of attractive young tourists that were all too eager to sign up for exciting new travel experiences. It was the perfect on-ramp for meeting adventurous women, tourists who were in town only for a few days and were eager for relief from their inhibiting home cities. Signing up for the volcano trekking expeditions, they were satisfying their craving for adventure, and Antigua was the #1 tourist mecca in the region. As the volcano touring boss of Antigua, Victor was the town's godfather of fun and adventure. Victor possessed a Steve Jobs-like reality distortion field. He'd effortlessly capture a room of people. He was attention gravity, and we'd all be marching to his masculine drum. In terms of personality, he was very much a positive version of Brad Pitt's Tyler Durden, but without the classical Hollywood looks, violence, or dark philosophy. Instead of Project Mayhem, he was the leader of Project Fun. I signed up for a couple of overnight expeditions to the Upekkha and Ekāyana-magga volcanoes. I'd spent a large part of my life behind a computer screen, and these expeditions were the antithesis of office life. I rapidly learned to love the great outdoors. I also learned about the lifestyle of the guides that Victor employed. I observed the leadership qualities and responsibilities they appeared to adopt with ease. I envied their dynamic and equanimous social vibe. They were doing a job they loved, and they were the coolest cats in town. I quickly recognized that there was a big opportunity here. Over the course of just a few days, I managed to convince myself that I, too, must become a guide. I felt that I possessed the completely wrong personality for the job, but I understood how big the opportunity was in terms of self-development. If not for the seduction community, I would have never even recognized the potential. The formula for personal growth is simple. Routinely make yourself uncomfortable by doing challenging things, and you will grow in character. A tourist guide job on an active volcano was the most fantastically out of character and anxiety-inducing job I could possibly imagine myself doing. Guiding required public speaking, and I lacked genuine confidence and still had some lingering social awkwardness. I'd be expected to be a leader and take responsibility for other people's welfare on a freaking active volcano. I'd had a hard enough time taking responsibility for my own life as an office rat. By becoming a guide, I believed I could finally overcome my social anxiety, gain leadership skills, and become comfortable with responsibility. Above all else, I might finally have a chance to achieve my long-standing goal of possessing genuine core confidence. I decided that I could do the job despite the difficulty. Extending my stay in Antigua, I pitched my wish to become a guide to Victor. I was Edward Norton's the narrator, asking Tyler if I could join a small team of merry guides. Henrik, guiding on the volcanoes, you're going to get the chance you're looking for. I can promise you that, amigo, but you have to be prepared for a complete lifestyle change. You see, if you really want this, man, you don't understand what's waiting for you. To my complete amazement and elation, he agreed to include me as an assistant guide. If I could prove myself worthy of the job by assisting on several expeditions, then I had a clear path to one day leading my own groups of tourists on the overnight trekking expeditions on the volcanoes. As Victor had forewarned, I quickly learned that there was a lot more to the expeditions than the actual lava-chasing volcano part. Behind the curtain, the guides were kept extremely busy. The preparation consumed several hours of pre- and post-trip work. A missing piece of equipment could ruin the whole tour. Trekking guides were required to know first aid, be responsible for the medical kit, tent, and sleeping bag logistics. They also cooked meals on the mountain for their guests. On the larger volcano, Ekāyana-magga, the guides were also responsible for coordinating the local armed police escorts that accompanied the expeditions. Safety from the roving bandits that sometimes preyed upon the tourist groups was of paramount importance. A couple of years earlier, Victor's girlfriend at the time had been raped, and the tourists robbed on the mountain, so security had become Victor's foremost priority. For a couple of months, I went all in, learning everything I could about my new assistant guide position. Of all the guides I assisted, my favorite was Zoe. She was only 21, confident and sassy, and very attractive. She was also off and on Victor's girlfriend. To be honest, she intimidated me. Despite being a petite young Canadian woman, she was the embodiment of uninhibited female swagger. Both Victor and Zoe possessed the same high degree of fun-loving extroversion and low neuroticism. We became good friends as our volcano guiding careers overlapped. One of my most memorable moments with Zoe was when we foolishly ventured up into the danger zone of the Volcán de Fuego, the active volcano of fire. It was kind of a rite of passage that we seized upon when the opportunity rose. We almost died on those perilous upper slopes as a sudden eruption brought a storm of explosive rocks raining down around us. Those rocks could easily have made a mockery of our perceived youthful immortality. Ironically, my opportunities to date women during my apprenticeship dwindled substantially. I was just too busy between the last trip and the next. On the volcanoes themselves, I could sometimes get to know the guests during the long treks. One very memorable trip in those early days was when I shared some great rapport with an incredibly sweet Bavarian-breasted German girl. Not only did we eagerly share some deep philosophical conversations during that trip, but she seemed genuinely interested in me. She gave me her phone number so we could meet up before she left Antigua. I was already fantasizing that after completing my guiding in Guatemala, I'd take a trip to Germany. After the expedition, I could think of nothing else but her as I busied myself with my post-trip duties. I remember obsessively thinking through and mentally crafting a clever first text message that I planned to send her the following day, inviting her on a date. The morning after the previous day's return, I was at the base camp coordinating the supplies for the next trip. Victor called to check how I was doing. "Henrik, you remember that German girl on your last trip? Oh, man, she stayed over. We just finished having breakfast. I enjoyed that one." This new information was a gut punch. I was crestfallen, bitter, and resentful with them both. "Damn it, Victor," I seethed inside. "Why did it have to be her?" But as my ego healed in the days that followed, I had to hand it to him. His seductive powers were formidable. Victor's most incredible feat of seduction, which I witnessed firsthand, was when we both sat together in a restaurant in the Colombian city of Manizales, nestled deep in the coffee region. Ostensibly, we were just two average-looking gringos enjoying an afternoon meal. But Victor was in the mood for fun, as always. An sexually attractive woman dressed in a revealing style that's a signature of Colombian femininity. Visualize Zuleika Rivera in Luis Fonsi's Despacito music video, sat at a nearby table. Victor surreptitiously made and held eye contact with the woman. This is sometimes called tiger eyes, sexualized eye contact in the seduction community, credited to the legendary Tom Torero. For Victor, this was simply the natural way he effortlessly and non-verbally communicated with women he found desirable. The conscientious wingman that I was, I looked away as Victor followed up the eye contact with a covert signal to the woman, gesturing towards the restrooms. Victor's behavior was especially audacious because the woman sat with another man, presumably her boyfriend or a colleague. Her companion was completely oblivious to what was going on as she excused herself from the table. Miraculously, Victor and the model beauty both met briefly at the entrance to the restrooms, and he silently and discreetly handed her his phone number on a scrap of paper. I thought the chances of a woman calling a man after such a ludicrously brief interaction were extremely low. That's conventional dating wisdom. But call him she did, and a few days later, Isabella was at our house. She visited Victor twice in the following week before we left Colombia to return to Guatemala. I met her on the second visit, and she was lovely, so sweet. We had a brief chat about my fondness of aguardiente, an anise-flavored liqueur of the region. I'd find the story difficult to believe had I not witnessed it firsthand. Victor wasn't just about the women. He was an effective and inspiring leader. Back in Guatemala, during my fourth expedition as a trainee guide, I screwed up badly, and he was left to deal with the fallout from the trip's dissatisfied guests. For that overnight trip, Zoe and I led a group of about 20 tourists onto Volcán de Pacaya. It was a night in which the volcano gods put on an exceptionally lavish show. We were privileged to find a double lava flow and get within 20 meters. As the molten flow snaked hypnotically down the perilous slope, our entire group was left either speechless or mouthing incoherent excitement. This was the magic of volcano guiding, leading people to witness a marvel of nature and witnessing their faces fully glowing in awe of nature. On that evening, Zoe and I turned to each other, high-fived, and agreed that we had the most awesome job on the planet. An hour before dawn the following morning, we goaded the guests out of their tents. Lions weren't permitted, and we had fun watching the soft urban dwellers emerging resentfully from their comforting cocoons into the chilly pre-dawn air. It was agreed that Zoe would take the majority of the group back up to the slopes to watch a sunrise panorama. I was to stay behind with the couple who felt they couldn't make the trip. Instead, I took them on a gentle stroll up the side of the volcano's older, dormant caldera. On reaching our viewpoint, the sun had just risen, and I asked my charges if they'd mind if I left them to make a quick exploration along the edge of the caldera as they enjoyed the early morning view. I could only afford to be a short time away from my guests. I was their guide back to camp, but I was eager to explore, and I thought nothing of leaving them for a short while. I reveled as my path led me to an expansive lava field that was the closest thing I could imagine to the desolate land of Mordor in The Lord of the Rings. The basalt rock landscape was formed from the rapid cooling of the low viscosity lava as it emerged and curdled above the surface. Time forgotten, I found an area where sulfuric fumes were still venting up from cracks in the basalt. My attention was consumed by this until I suddenly found myself completely engulfed in fog. I was now inside a cloud that had rapidly swept across the Upekkha complex. Visibility had reduced down to about 5 meters. It was eerily quiet, and my small bubble of a world on this moonscape was completely still. I retraced my steps back to the way I thought I'd come, but there was no vegetation edge to the lava field. I searched some more, but without success. The fog was now thicker than ever. It dawned on me that I was lost, and that I was probably already late getting back to my guests. Not knowing how to return to the camp without me, they too were stranded. Even greater than my concern for the guests I was supposed to be taking care of was the sudden certainty that Victor would surely fire me for this fuck-up. This was my dream job, and I'd already screwed it up on just my 4th expedition as an assistant. As I circled about, lost in the fog, my mind went into a tailspin of self-loathing and recrimination. I had experienced the highest of natural highs the night before, and now, this morning, I was trapped at the other end of the spectrum. The torrid inner storm of my mind was a fitting match for the outer, sulfur-smelling hellscape of the lava field. Finally, after what felt like several hours, I heard the sound that would rescue me. It was the almost inaudible chirp of a lone bird off in the distance. I eagerly set off towards the bird song. Birds prefer trees and vegetation over barren rocks. The chirps became gradually more audible until I was finally out of the lava field where I could retrace my path. My relief was intense. A little bird had rescued me. As I returned to the breakfast camp, my guests were very relieved and agitated in equal measure to see me. Joining the main group back at our camp and explaining what had happened was humiliating. Volcano expeditions were always followed by a group lunch after the journey back to Antigua. For guides, lunch was followed by a debrief with Victor. I was miserable, convinced that I was about to lose my cherished assistant guide position. After retelling my tale to Victor and apologizing profusely for letting down the team, silence followed as he contemplated me. Hendrik, do you know how lucky you are? Do you know how hard it is to get lost in this day and age? He then roared his alpha laugh. Congratulations, my friend. You just had an awesome personal growth experience. That was Victor. It was such a Tyler Durden-esque way to respond. He used the kind of language he knew I would relate best to, and was very amused by the whole episode. His attitude immediately put me at ease, and relief washed over me. Victor pounded me reassuringly on the back. We both laughed and knew what to say next, and in unison, we told each other our house mantra. That just happened. I count myself privileged that Victor took me under his wing as a mentor. He was investing in me, reassuring me that I was a valuable team member in the making and that errors in judgment were all part of the learning curve. He was right. A couple of months later, I was guiding my own trips. I continued to lead expeditions as a fully fledged and fully paid guide for another 11 months. That was certainly one of the happiest and most fulfilling periods of my 30s. Back then, the key to Victor's considerable masculinity and charisma were far from clear. What made him such a successful leader? And how did he, seemingly effortlessly, have his choice of the most attractive tourists who signed up? How did he always take what he wanted? And why did women so eagerly allow him to take it? It was undoubtedly his unburdened, fun-loving acceptance of life and others. He possessed no neediness, no brittle defensiveness. He had an authentic personality that allowed others to feel safe around him, especially women. his ability to create a compelling shared purpose around the adventure of experiencing the volcanoes. This was his gift to the tourists of Antigua and his loyal band of volcano guides. Was there a root cause that manifested all these positive character traits? And most importantly, if it existed, could it be learned? In the next chapter, we'll explore the core principle of Victor's superpowers. Chapter 2. The Labyrinth of NIMH. Just as a healthy body can allow us to feel good within ourselves and behave attractively around others, a healthy, conscious mind can do the same. In hindsight, the chasm between Victor's results and my own should have been easier for me to understand. We were both similar in terms of looks, though he was a decade older than me, but he'd lived his entire life in the open wilderness of the mountains, free and expansive, leading city dwellers to experience natural wonders of the world like the flowing lava of the volcanoes and the glaciers of the southern Andes. He built his life and his business on fun and adventure, fully experiencing the now. I, on the other hand, built my business on bits of data on a computer screen, trapped by technology and incessant productivity deadlines. Our tight-fisted customers exploited us at every twist and turn of our contractual imprisonment, while the fun-loving guests on Victor's expeditions threw money at him for an opportunity to experience nature in all her raw and untamed beauty. Does this mean we have to give up the prosperity and security of our comfortably numb, screen-driven experiences? Do we need to leave it all behind us and, as the Eminem lyric goes, grow beards, get weird, and disappear into the mountains? No, we don't need to go to these extremes. But we do need to look deep within ourselves and ask some fundamental questions. How might we transform our conscious experience and then tap into the Victor-like character traits that women find oh so attractive? Let us begin. After my volcano guiding year, I returned to Europe, where I was once again thrust back into my old life of subsisting as a stressed-out office drone with insomnia. The money was running low. We discovered the stewards entrusted to take care of our company were incompetent, and we needed to reinvent the business as our original software niche was aging and our customers were terminating the contracts. This was a very bitter pill to swallow, as I'd already tasted the sweet, sulfuric outdoor freedom of the volcanoes. It was at this point that I started dabbling with meditation as a means of coping with my return to captivity. Meditation was intriguing to me for a few reasons. It seemed to offer many positive benefits. It was inexpensive compared to visiting therapists, and the solo endeavor appealed to my natural introversion. I read countless online articles about the virtues of mindfulness, many of them backed by research papers, and all seemed to promise salvation. The touted benefits ranged from an alternative to side effect-laden medications to treat depression, brain changes that enhance mental performance and well-being, emotional regulation, increased immune function, and greater longevity. But before I could commit to a serious and consistent amount of meditation practice, my aversion to time wasting convinced me that I first needed to find the correct method and the core reasons for how it would actually help me. Because I was completely on my own at first, with no time for a retreat or to seek coaching, my journey from occasionally dabbling in mindfulness to becoming skilled at meditating was much longer than it needed to be. What follows are my conclusions about the key benefits of meditation after a decade of practice, including several methods and retreats and my own research. Meditation improves the health of our consciousness by optimizing the way we perceive the world. Consciousness is our moment-to-moment experience of the world. Whatever we perceive in the exterior world outside ourselves, input from our senses, and whatever arises internally in the form of thoughts, memories, and emotions, all flow and intertwine to form our conscious experience. Just as a healthy body can allow us to feel good within ourselves and behave attractively around others, a healthy, conscious mind can do the same. Like physical strength in sports, the size, strength, and skill of our consciousness matters if we're to fulfill our masculine potential. Unfortunately, most of us have a relatively poor baseline of conscious health. Even if we feel we have a high level of happiness and fulfillment compared to the people around us, it's likely still nowhere near our true potential for optimal consciousness. There's a long way up to nirvana. To help us understand our predicament, what follows is a simplified model of how consciousness works. In this model, there are two distinct, opposing ways of perceiving the world. One can be called awareness-based consciousness, and the other, attention-based consciousness. I credit this attention-awareness distinction to the meditation master and neuroscientist Upekkha Culadasa, who I will more thoroughly introduce in the next chapter. Culadasa's work, in turn, was influenced by Dr. Ian McGilchrist, a prominent psychiatrist and author of the book The Master and His Emissary, subtitled The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. Attention-based consciousness is a narrowly focused perception that allows us to grasp information with precision. Awareness-based consciousness, also known as peripheral awareness, provides the holistic context from the entire conscious field of our perception. To function optimally in the world, we need to attend to details, and we also need to maintain awareness of the larger contextual meaning of what we experience. In this model, the opposing perceptions are analogous to how our eyesight functions. Your eyes can either focus on a specific object of attention, such as an individual tree, or you can broaden your focus to become aware of the entire visual space in front of you, such as a beautiful forest. Most of us typically struggle to see the forest for the trees because we've been conditioned since birth, acculturated throughout our entire lives, to value attention to details above the need for a more expansive context awareness in the present moment. This attention to detail versus the wider awareness dichotomy, however simple, is the foundation for understanding why we are unable to consistently access our most fulfilling and attractive state of mind. Our all-consuming, attention-driven processing of the world pervasively inhibits our ability to live life with awareness in the present moment. A helpful metaphor can be found in an unlikely source, the classic children's book, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien. The story follows a field mouse whose home is facing the threat of destruction by a farmer's plow. Seeking help, she finds a society of former laboratory rats. These rats were caught, removed from their natural habitat, and put into the captivity of the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH. Through experimentation, the rodents were transformed into super rats. They possessed enhanced intelligence, were literate, and, after escaping, they developed a technological society that harnessed electricity, including elevators, heating, and lighting. Here is one particularly poignant quote from the book, as one rat tries to get through his prison maze that's been set up to benchmark his rapidly increasing intelligence. Why would I bother to run through it at all if I knew it was only a trick? The answer is, I couldn't help it. When you've lived in a cage, you can't bear not to run, even if you're running towards an illusion. Rather subversive for a children's book, no? The problem with being a product of our modern, attention-driven culture is that our subjective life experience leads us to feel like rats in a labyrinth. From the narrow perspective of our frenetically moving attention, we're either scurrying towards the next clickbait, craving, or fleeing from a perceived threat, experiencing aversion. Most of us can acknowledge that life is a struggle, that even when we reach our goals, the sense of fulfillment will be short-lived. New challenges soon present themselves, keeping us on a never-ending quest to solve the riddle of the maze. What if we take a left turn instead of a right turn? Will that decision finally lead to lasting happiness? Unfortunately, for we humans, the rats of NIMH metaphor fails when we compare our modern predicament to the advanced rat society at the conclusion of the novel. In the story, the rats' considerable intelligence allows them to escape the laboratory and build their own technological society. Using their intelligence to win their freedom, they can enjoy their happy rodent lives beyond the labyrinth, with all the benefits of their advanced brains, a happy ending. However, for Homo sapiens, wise humans, it's our intelligence and success as a species that has imprisoned us in a predominantly attention-dominated mode of consciousness. Our ability to obsessively attend to details, real or imagined, has brought marvelous benefits in the form of an abundant and relatively safe civilization. But this has come at a cost to our conscious health. Rather than fully liberating us, our runaway intelligence has left us hobbled and suffering from poor conscious health. Despite all the technological advantages, that health is deteriorating further as a plethora of technology enables us to get ahead of our fellow man in the hamster wheel of modern life. We're expected to achieve more with less time and within increasingly narrow areas of expertise. Time is compressed, and the present moment has become almost totally devalued. Modern life demands our incessant and precise attention and is indifferent to our holistic self-awareness. No matter how many left or right turn decisions you make in life, as long as decisions are made from the perspective of being in a left-minded labyrinth, you'll always remain a prisoner. The outlook for this dominant mode of consciousness is quite unbalanced and dysfunctional. Of course, all this presupposes that the model presented here is correct. Is there any empirical research to support the model? While I've been meditating for years and found great benefits in strengthening my awareness-based consciousness, my spirituality, I still find it hard to stomach anything that's not grounded in solid reality. My attention-biased mind demands it. Fortunately for the non-mystical types, such as myself, our anatomy fully supports the model. Our brain is divided into two halves, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere perceives the world with attention-heavy processing that understands language, numbers, reductionism, and mechanical reasoning, all activities that require consciousness to grasp and focus on specific details in the field of perception. Conversely, the right hemisphere is attuned to perceiving a wider scope of information, but at a lower resolution. The right hemisphere perceives by intuiting the holistic meaning, the context in the larger field of awareness. Each hemisphere brings its own strengths, contributing to the greater whole. If we were only able to function from one of the hemispheres, our perception of the world would be severely handicapped. As it stands, modern civilization has provided a significant bias towards the left hemisphere, so we're only partially handicapped. If we were to take a brain and split it in half, severing the link between the hemispheres, we would create two independent, handicapped individuals, each with their own attention or awareness-based perception. Yes, each hemisphere possesses its own independent, conscious, and fully sentient being. Two individual sentient beings within the same whole brain. Two different personalities, two sets of memories, two sets of eyes looking out and comprehending the world independently and distinctly. Fortunately for us, these sentient beings work together seamlessly to produce our unified perception of the world. Neuropsychologist Roger Sperry's famous split brain experiments in the 1950s and 1960s demonstrated this two minds in one brain architecture. Sperry performed animal and human research into the functional differences between the two hemispheres of the brain. As a treatment for severe epilepsy, the corpus callosum, the thick nerve tract that connects the two hemispheres, was severed. Without this connecting superhighway, two independent consciousnesses were observed, each with their own characteristics. This path of research later won Sperry the 1981 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine. In the words of Sperry himself, each hemisphere is indeed a conscious system in its own right, perceiving, thinking, remembering, reasoning, willing, and emoting, all at a characteristically human level, and both the left and the right hemisphere may be conscious simultaneously in different, even in mutually conflicting mental experiences that run along in parallel. As a thought experiment, given that we are left hemisphere dominated, What would it be like to experience the world and have a sense of awareness purely from a right hemisphere perspective? The monks of the monasteries in the East, having spent decades in contemplative training, may be able to tell us. Others take shortcuts in the form of chemical assistance, such as psychedelics. Drugs like dimethyltryptamine, DMT, the primary psychoactive ingredient in ayahuasca, or psilocybin, magic mushrooms. We could also ask a Western brain scientist who had the experience of observing her left hemisphere going almost completely offline. In 1996, Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, an American neuroanatomist, suffered a massive stroke in her left hemisphere. Within hours, she had an intimate perspective on her left hemisphere completely deteriorating to the extent that it was no longer able to process any information. She was unable to walk, talk, or even recall the memories of her past and identity. In the aftermath of her stroke, Taylor was completely removed from the labyrinth. She experienced life predominantly through awareness-based consciousness. She became fully immersed in the present moment, which she experienced as an immense, energetic collage of sensory input. As she put it, "In this moment we are perfect, we are whole, and we are beautiful." For a deep dive into the brain science, her experiences of the stroke, and her long road to recovering full, whole brain function, I thoroughly recommend Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight. Let's circle back to the question at the start of the chapter. How can mindfulness meditation improve the health of our consciousness? Given the correct method, which I will introduce in the next chapter, mindfulness meditation has the effect of taming our dominant, attention-driven minds and strengthening the awareness-based part of our minds. When we meditate, we are realigning the balance of power between attention and awareness in the conscious whole. In this healing process, we become more fully present, fulfilled, equanimous, and less subservient to an attention-dominated world. These awareness-based qualities will form the attractive foundation from which the rest of this book will unfold. Moving forward, for convenience, I'll replace left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and attention-based consciousness, awareness-based consciousness, which have been necessary for the discussion in this chapter, to my preferred and simplified terms, left-minded and right-minded. Our overarching goal in masculine meditations is to develop more right mindfulness and to become more of a right-minder. In the next chapter, we'll explore how becoming more right-minded, escaping the left-minded labyrinth, can significantly improve our attractive behaviors around intimidatingly hot women. Chapter 3, Powerlifting for the Mind for Right-Mindedness. Samatha meditation is the gold standard practice for strengthening right-mindedness. Mastering the earlier stages of this meditation practice can reduce our unattractive behaviors, and as we grow in skill and power, the later stages can enhance our attractive behaviors. Mindfulness allows us to recognize our options, choose our response wisely, and take control over the direction of our lives. It also gives us the power to change our past conditioning and become the person we want to be. This is a quote from author and neuroscientist John Yates, PhD. He was more commonly known to his students by his name of ordination as a dedicated lay practitioner, Upekkha Culadasa. In addition to his academic background, Culadasa was also a meditation master with over 4 decades of experience in the Tibetan and Theravadan Buddhist traditions. He was an arhat, which in Buddhism means one who has achieved nirvana. His dedication to both objectively understanding the mind through academic research and subjectively gaining insight through contemplative practice gave him a rare insight into the intersectionality between brain science and meditation. Culadasa's book, The Mind Illuminated, Integrating Buddhist Wisdom and Brain Science for Greater Mindfulness, provides a modern roadmap to help us practice the optimal form of meditation. It's the clearest and most comprehensive meditation manual that's available at the time of writing. The book merges the neuroscience of the West with the contemplative practices of the East to produce a very accessible mental strength gym plan for the mind. The Mind Illuminated teaches a form of meditation practice called samatha. Often translated as tranquility of the mind, samatha is the specific meditation method we'll use to become attractive right-minders. The Tibetan taming the elephant illustration, as shown prior to this chapter, is often used to depict the progression of a meditator who practices samatha. At its essence, samatha is based on mindfulness of the breath, but there's so much more to the practice as a meditator progresses from novice to skilled to adept levels of mastery. The practice is taught in 10 stages. This stage progression is the gamification of the process of learning to meditate. As men, we love a challenging journey with a clear set of goals that increase in skill level as we progress. Our masculine directionality functions best this way. Think of the martial arts and the system of colored belts they often use to motivate students, or the levels of a computer game. Each of the stages has its own goals, obstacles, techniques, and benchmarks for mastery. The instructions for practice explain the most efficient route to mastery for each stage. The guidance is remarkably detailed, from the early stages of trying to intentionally sustain attention on the breath, to working to overcome subtle distractions and enhance mindfulness, to finally unifying the mind at the adept stages. Of crucial importance to our purposes, the samatha meditation, as taught in The Mind Illuminated, prioritizes developing the optimal balance and control of attention by awareness, which strongly supports our right-minded goals. Indeed, Culadasa wasn't only the architect and author of the attention awareness model of consciousness, but also a series of deeper, mind-blowing models into the engineering of consciousness. During the writing of Masculine Meditations, I had the opportunity to directly ask Culadasa this question. In your opinion, is it fair to say that mindfulness meditation can bring us more right-mindedness? His opening response to my question was quite profound. The answer to that should be an unequivocal yes. It's not because there's so much that's taught as mindfulness meditation, which is the absolute opposite of that. It leads not to an optimal balance and control of the direction of attention by awareness, but just the opposite. Those practices lead to attention being in more control, of the perspective on the world being even more attention-dominated than others. And so those mindfulness practices are taking us in the wrong way, and nobody knows the difference, including most of the teachers. He's warning us that not all meditation methods are equally good for our purposes, and we must be sure to train our minds in the correct way to avoid squandering our time and to maximize our investment with momentum. The plethora of meditation programs that are available in your app store promoting 10 minutes of guided daily mindfulness won't help you become a right-minder. Our strategy must be to first develop the stability and consistency of our attention to the breath, our left-mindedness, and from this foundation, we'll increase the skill and power of our peripheral awareness, our right-mindedness. The practice, as taught in The Mind Illuminated, trains awareness to become the vigilant master, with attention its faithful servant. Optimal consciousness, as Upasaka Culadasa states, is the optimal balance and control of the direction of attention by awareness. As a general guideline, mastering the earliest stages of samatha can reduce our unattractive left-minded behaviors, and the latter stages can enhance our attractive right-minded behaviors. It's necessary to highlight, however, that the remaining chapters here within Masculine Meditations don't follow sequentially the order of the 10 meditation stages. The remaining chapters of this book are structured in such a way as to reflect how our interactions with women progress, from first meeting women to behaving confidently on dates, and finally, leading the dance of physical and emotional intimacy. Your progress as a meditator, however, can positively influence all three attractive qualities simultaneously at any stage to varying degrees. Milestone 1, Mastering the Novice Stages of Samatha, 1 through 3. During the novice stages, we work to stabilize and sustain our attention on the breath. We are effectively becoming a more efficient, less unconscious left-minder by reversing many of our negative, automatic, and reactive behaviors. If we're not skilled at stabilizing and sustaining our attention, our unconscious and unattractive habits will continue to run the show. Of intentionally directing and sustaining attention on the breath in the early stages, Culadasa writes, "This is the very essence of meditation. We reprogram unconscious mental processes by repeating basic tasks over and over with a clear intention." Culadasa identifies the mind's habit of spontaneous movements of attention as a conscious weakness that most non-meditators suffer from. When our attention moves spontaneously and without direction, it can be so easily influenced by distractions in our peripheral awareness. In an untrained mind, our ability to pay attention and concentrate is completely at the mercy of this rapid, spontaneous movement. To experience this spontaneous movement of attention, you can try the classic first-time meditators challenge. Close your eyes and attempt to follow the in and out flow of your breath at your nostrils. See if you can maintain your attention on the breath for all of 60 seconds. Are you able to maintain your focus on your breath for the entire minute without the intrusion of distracting thoughts or your attention spontaneously moving away? This inability of our attention to sustain focus is both a matter of evolution and our acculturation. Natural selection favors having a constantly and spontaneously moving attention to guard against predators. This vestigial aspect of our nature, in our modern society that's considerably safer and more abundant than the savanna, is now a disadvantage. It's a hindrance of the older mammalian part of our brains that hasn't kept pace with the rapid march of civilization. Now it only adds to our stress. Furthermore, our acculturation amplifies this bad habit of the mind because modern society demands our constantly moving attention and multitasking. Smartphone addictions, our frenetic, screen-driven professional lives, spectator streaming shows, pornography, our sugar-saturated diets, all this dopamine and cortisol overstimulation in our modern lives leaves our mind's stability of attention in an impoverished state. When it comes to dating, our poor and unattractive behaviors are also triggered by this spontaneous movement of attention. We would like to behave with cool and assertive composure on a date. But why do we end up saying dumb shit that's either inappropriate or exposes our perceived unworthiness? For the more experienced guys, when a kiss attempt is awkwardly deflected by our cheek, why is it that we instantly turn insecure, jittery, and apologetic? We simply can't stay cool if our attention has all the stability of an anxious chimpanzee. Fixing this attention deficit disorder with meditation, not medication, is analogous to seeking physiotherapy to restore the body's stability of motion after a disease or injury. The first milestone on the meditation path, between stages 3 and 4, is to achieve continuous attention to the breath. Being able to pay attention to your breath for several minutes at a time is a considerable achievement. Here's a summary of the potential benefits of this skill as relates to your social and dating life. It must be noted, however, that these effects will only last for a limited time after your last meditation session. For a 1-hour meditation of continuously following the breath, you have potentially a couple of hours after you end the session to enjoy the benefits before they wear off. Meditating before going on a date is highly recommended. Less fear or anxiousness. We're prone to our insecurities and anxious habits when asking a woman on a date, or when trying to figure out what to say on that first date, or when attempting to increase intimacy. Our minds are less susceptible to rapid, unconscious movements of attention that trigger the amygdala, the brain's freak-out center, to feel fear and anxiety. We will begin to discuss these themes in Chapter 4, Ego Death by Approach, for approaching. Less judgment. When your attention is easily hijacked by strong emotions, comparisons and judgments are instant and irresistible. A man who isn't incessantly doubting his self-worth and his performance isn't sabotaging his interactions with women. If you're young and healthy, then performance anxiety is all in your head, regardless of whether it occurs during a drinks date or in the bedroom. We discussed the harmful effects of these judgments in Chapter 7, Non-Self, Anatta, for non-self-confidence. Less indecisiveness or resistance. One of the main skills you'll learn in the early stages is to continually reinforce your intention to follow the breath. Sustained conscious intention is a very masculine trait. Your verbal communication, your body language, and the actions you take can all benefit from more powerful intentions and less unconscious indecision and resistance. Women don't trust indecisive men. We explore masculine intent in Chapter 9, Intention, Cetanā, for intent and calibration. Less reactivity. When a woman rejects or challenges us, however subtly, our attention reacts blindly and without guidance, causing us to lose our balance and react automatically. As a meditator, when women test our masculinity, sometimes called congruence tests, we're less likely to react unconsciously. We're more likely to behave equanimously and maintain a manlier composure after the challenge. We delve deeper into this topic in Chapter 10, Equanimity, Upekkha, for solidity. Milestone 2, Mastering the skilled stages of samatha, 4 through 6. During the intermediate stages of samatha, we work to make consciousness, our mindfulness, more powerful. Of increasing the power of our right mindfulness, Culadasa writes, attention plays a more appropriate role within the greater context of broad and powerful awareness. You're fully present, happier, and at ease because you're not so easily caught up in the stories and melodramas the mind likes to concoct. This occurs in two ways. First, we're learning to use our peripheral awareness effectively, becoming a skilled right-minder. Second, we're strengthening our overall conscious bandwidth, becoming a strong right-minder. Both skill and strength become a badass combination in whichever sport we're pursuing. For the novice stages, we use the analogy of needing physiotherapy to restore stability and a full range of motion to the body after a disease or injury. Having achieved this first milestone of rehabilitation, we can now sign up for a swanky, all-inclusive, mind-building gym membership. The focus in these stages will be on developing various forms of awareness training called extrospective awareness, awareness exterior to the body, introspective awareness, awareness of thoughts and emotions, and finally, metacognitive introspective awareness, continuously observing the state and activity of the mind. These practices are essentially the bench presses, squats, and deadlifts of meditation. Take a moment to imagine the compounding effect that many thousands of awareness-based breath reps will have on your attractive behaviors. As you progress through the intermediate stages of your training to becoming a skilled mental lifter, you're essentially getting mentally jacked, bulking and toning neural muscle, and resculpting your mental physique in all the most attractive areas. Instead of strutting on the exterior, your gains are expressed in the way your personality penetrates the world. The second milestone on the meditation path between stages 6 and 7 is to achieve sustained, exclusive focus of attention. With vigilant awareness, your attention is no longer influenced by subtle distractions and dullness, low consciousness. When you can maintain exclusive focus of attention on the breath using powerful mindfulness, you are considered a skilled meditator. For a 1-hour meditation, you have potentially 3 to 4 hours after you end the session to enjoy the maximum benefits. I liken the duration to that of a strong coffee, assuming you're not a coffee addict. Again, meditating before going on a date is highly recommended. She will love the new you. Here's a summary of how a skilled level of samatha can level up your attractiveness to women. Contagious positivity. A peaceful and unburdened mind is a joyful mind. With powerfully vigilant peripheral awareness, hindrances stop preventing our mind's natural state of happiness from arising. This positivity is contagious because of the law of state transference. What you feel, she will feel. We'll discuss the source of true happiness and how we can effortlessly share our positivity in Chapter 5, Happiness, Sukha, for great vibes. Improved confidence. Expanded and vigilant awareness can allow us to operate with fully in-the-moment presence rather than with conditioned automatic responses based on past experiences. Achieving this power of now, as the bestseller Eckhart Tolle book of the same name expresses it, can give rise to a new and rarefied form of confidence. We'll explore what it means to have a deep sense of confidence in Chapter 7, Non-Self, Anatta, for non-self confidence. Authentic character expression. With the acceptance of the natural flow of your personality, your own brand of authentic character expression can arise. Your unique authenticity can make you the prize which a woman can't find elsewhere. We'll delve into the concept of attractive personality expression and how we can manifest more of it in Chapter 8, Impermanence, Anicca, for non-self-expression. The adept stages of samatha, 7 through 10. The advanced stages of samatha further enhance the power and tranquility of the mind. The mind begins to unify, coalescing around a single, powerful purpose. And insight practices in the final stages could completely and permanently change your life for the better. How far must we take the practice? If this becomes your passion, you may decide to go all in and aim for the first stages of awakening, also known as enlightenment. This profound transition marks the beginning of the end of mind-generated suffering. But are the adept stages of samatha necessary to transform into a more attractive version of yourself? Certainly not. Reaching the second milestone and becoming a skilled meditator, perhaps only after 3 to 6 months of dedicated daily practice, is more than enough to receive many considerable benefits. The Pareto principle, or 80-20 rule, states that 80% of the benefits will come from the first 20% of your efforts. My experience is that this rule is both accurate in game and meditation. Achieving the final 20% to elite-level mastery would be wonderful, a truly epic longer-term goal, but it's certainly not a prerequisite for a fulfilling work-life balance and a lovely girlfriend. We end this chapter with a warning. You don't need to accomplish a lofty meditation state before you're ready to begin dating. Meditation, socializing, and dating should all move forward in parallel. As we discuss in the next chapter, the most rewarding path is found in synergizing a consistent meditation practice with a courageous social and dating life. Chapter 4, Ego Death by Approach, for approaching. What you experience as you break through your mind's resistance and start your feet moving to approach and introduce yourself to a desirable woman is a very brief but profound surrender of your ego. To realize your most attractive masculinity and right-mindedness, this book advocates building a consistent mindfulness meditation practice. Samatha meditation will gradually recondition the undesirable parts of your left-mindedness and lessen your susceptibility to the mind hindrances holding you back. The states of mind achieved during awareness-based samatha are expansive, harmonious, and free of the ego's gravity well, all states that are the domain of your right-minded consciousness. But meditating in isolation isn't enough to improve your dating life. You can't become naturally attractive and skilled at dating women by simply sitting cross-legged in your mountain man cave for hours on end. You must actively go out and interact with women as an integrated part of your practice. Think in terms of compound exercises at the gym in which you train multiple parts of your body simultaneously. Buddhist monks aren't renowned for their charismatic prowess with women, and I'm sure the yogi I will now introduce would be equally clueless around women, but this monk did recognize that formal meditation alone and in isolation was insufficient if he was to achieve the highest possible levels of enlightenment. The Tibetan Buddhist teacher named Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche is regarded by scientists to be one of the most accomplished meditators alive today. What does it mean to be an elite-level meditator? A prominent scientist, Richard Davidson, led the extensive research of the effects of meditation on the brain at his laboratory at the University of Wisconsin. As early as 2002, a 27-year-old Mingyur, who had already spent over 60,000 hours meditating at that time, and many other yogis submitted themselves to countless hours of examination of their brains through EEG and fMRI scans. In a Daniel Goleman book that chronicles that research, Altered Traits, Science Reveals How Meditation Changes Your Mind, Brain, and Body, Goleman writes, this was the very EEG wave that Mingyur had displayed in that surprising surge during both open presence and compassion. And now Ritchie's team saw the same unusual brain pattern in all the yogis as a standard feature of their everyday neural activity. In other words, Ritchie and Antoine had stumbled upon the Holy Grail, a neural signature showing an enduring transformation. The yogi's baseline conscious experience, without needing to be in a meditative state, is different from ours. Their brain plasticity, their neural hardwiring is transformed after decades of meditation. These traits are permanent unless they make equally Herculean efforts to untransform their brain circuitry. They've escaped from the labyrinth and will never return. Goldman reveals the extent to which the researchers attempted to stress the yogis. The yogis, on the other hand, had a very different response in this sequence. They, like the controls, were also in a state of open presence. No doubt one some magnitudes greater than for the novices. For the yogis, their pain matrix showed little change in activity when the plate warmed a bit, even though this cue meant extreme pain was 10 seconds away. Their brains seemed to simply register that cue with no particular reaction. These are the most resilient, compassionate, and joyful beings on the planet. The state of open presence that Goldman refers to is the same awareness-based consciousness, right-mindedness that we seek more of. An early prodigy, Mingyur begged to be admitted to enter a traditional 3-year retreat at Sharab Monastery when he turned 13. Entering a 3-year retreat at such a young age was highly unusual, but Mingyur achieved an extraordinary level of mastery almost immediately after the end of the retreat. When his teacher passed away, he was anointed as the monastery's next retreat master and began a new 3-year retreat, this time as the teacher responsible for guiding the monks and nuns of the new retreat. At age 20, he became the abbot of the monastery. Years later, Mingyur absconded from his monastery in the middle of the night, leaving only a farewell letter to explain his sudden disappearance. He'd embarked on a wandering retreat that would last 4 years. Leaving the comfort and security of the monastery to roam free is unusual for monastics in modern times. He said of the experience, "I had a strong determination to be on the streets, but I was naive to think I could live on the streets right away. It took me a while. Giving up my identity as a monk was one thing, and of course, I also had to let go of my desire for comfort, food, and the basic necessities of life, even the desire to be safe. It was a good way to practice my meditation on letting go." Indeed, just weeks into his journey, Mingyur Rinpoche had a near-death experience. Allowing his money to run out, sleeping on the streets, and eating only the food that was freely available to him in India, he contracted an illness that was likely botulism, a rare but potentially fatal illness. As he became increasingly ill, he began to focus on the death and dying meditation he'd learned. He attributes breaking through to this, letting go of the ultimate attachment, life itself. I had to really let my old self die, and not just as an idea. I had to allow my physical body to die. He regained consciousness in a hospital, recovered, and described the remainder of his years-long retreat as fantastic. As we see from Mingyur Rinpoche's story, learning from real-life experiences, from the traumas and the triumphs, must go hand in hand with formal meditation to maximize the potential for personal growth. Of course, I'm not suggesting anything remotely comparable to Mingyur Rinpoche's breaking through. But as men, we do have a remarkable tool at our disposal that provokes all the fear and anxiety of intense real-life experience. This tool is a form of brief ego death, but with zero risk for physical health. It's known as cold approaching, or as I prefer to call it, as a counterpoint to meeting people online, offline approaching. Offline approaching means seeing a woman you haven't previously met, feeling a strong masculine tug of attraction, and recognizing an opportunity to strike up a conversation. It may sound relatively straightforward, but if you have no recent experience of approaching offline in our online world, your resistance to actually walking up and saying hello to that desirable woman will be considerable. Your brain suddenly and fiercely invents a host of rationalizations and resistance to manning up and taking action. You worry about what to say. You resist because you aren't wearing your best jacket. You worry about what people around you will think. You feel like you're bothering the woman. You feel that you're doing something socially inappropriate. You rationalize that it'll be much better to play it safe and sanitized with some good old-fashioned online dating. But these reasons for squandering an attractive opportunity aren't the root cause of your resistance. Erich von Markovic, in his classic book of pickup artistry, The Mystery Method, How to Get Beautiful Women into Bed, describes this resistance as an evolutionary hard wiring to prevent us from getting our heads bashed in by rival tribe members for approaching the wrong woman of childbearing age. Conversely, Nick Krauser, in his textbook Day Game Mastery, which lays out the practical mechanics of how to cold approach and seduce women, offers his take on this resistance. At the root of all approach anxiety is a lack of self-acceptance. This is a very insightful diagnosis, and it aligns with the inherent lack of completeness from which our left-mindedness operates. I agree with both points of view. We do have a hardwired aversion to approaching strangers because of our primitive ancestors, and this resistance is reinforced by the acculturated parts of our minds. Manning up and saying hello to that attractive stranger can be terrifying. Going beyond your comfort zone and breaking through that resistance is your key to growth. Resistance is like a beacon, illuminating the fastest path to the most fulfilling masculinity. What you experience as you break through your mind's resistance and start your feet moving to approach the woman is a very brief but profound surrender of your ego. Like a self-immolating monk, it's your own left-mindedness that's willing to let go for a small moment in time and sacrifice itself for the greater cause. If you then repeat this brief ego death a handful of times, you will experience a temporary dissolution of your sense of self. As your ego recedes into the background, the blockage is removed and the feeling is liberating. This is right-mindedness, and as we will thoroughly explore in later chapters, it's the key to unlocking so many attractive masculine qualities within you. Meeting women directly, without resorting to online dating, will also allow you to receive immediate and clear feedback. Allow women this opportunity, face-to-face at the very beginning, and you'll save yourself so much convoluted, left-minded heartache. There'll be no awkward first dates after weeks of online messaging. The question of whether she can feel attraction for you is settled right there and then. Despite the enormous practicality of just seeing someone you like and saying hello, offline approaching women is controversial, partly due to low-consciousness men legitimately creeping women out with bad game, and partly because society at large is becoming increasingly hostile to overt displays of masculinity. Done correctly, however, by a skilled, right-minded man with discretion and the ability to genuinely attract and connect with a woman, it will feel like a fantastic peak experience moment for both you and the woman. It will feel like this is the correct way, the natural masculine way, and online dating will feel inauthentic and convoluted by comparison. If the woman is curious or excited by your approach, you've successfully demonstrated your attractive qualities in the first few moments of knowing her. If she rejects you, politely telling you that she doesn't have time right now, you have an opportunity for growth. Your interactions with women are a window into the workings of your masculinity. This immediate feedback will be a precious resource on your journey. For Minya Rinpoche, it was the feedback from the hard, unforgiving reality of the streets of India. Resilient masculinity and right-mindedness are forged by confronting reality head-on in the real world. If you have the opportunity, warm approaching is an alternative. Create flirtatious conversations with women within your own wider social circle, like at a house party or meetup group. Whichever style of approach you use, start slow. Give the woman a simple, genuine compliment without expecting any particular reaction in return, and then politely exit if it becomes clear that she doesn't want to continue the conversation. As a beginner, think of an approach in terms of its similarity to formal mindfulness meditation. As you attempt to follow the rhythm of your breath with openness and positivity, you very quickly realize that you have very little control over the behavior of your unruly monkey mind. But at least you've tried. As you fail, without judgment, you calmly return your intent to following the next breath. You gradually develop your ability to observe the breath for longer periods. Only when you ride a positive feedback loop do you move on to achieving deep states of concentrated absorption, or unifying the mind and ultimately attaining nirvana. By comparison, start a brief conversation with a woman. As you gain experience with intent, engaging positivity and without judgment, your conversations will last longer. You'll gain insight into how to trigger attraction, and finally you'll create exciting, nirvana-like connections with women. All this without the stifling, inorganic, left-minded nature of online dating. Chapter 5. Happiness. Sukha, for great bods. Being in the zone, or being in a flow state, has often been connected to happiness. Adept meditators can readily access blissful states as they cultivate not only an intense, focused attention, but also an expanded awareness. The ability to generate a joyful vibe in yourself and then lead others to feel that same positivity is a great power. On my path to becoming a right-minder, I embraced my favorite ego death by approach mantra with a passion. As such, I became a day gamer who practiced the art of day game. We were a community of men who sought to better our romantic opportunities by approaching women during the day, in circumstances removed from the typical nighttime Darwinian meat markets of our era. Turning our backs on the seduction community's traditional night game domain in bars or clubs, we instead hit the streets, bookshops, malls, any public place with women that didn't involve loud music and alcohol. It felt more wholesome and genuine. My clubs are designed to play to a young woman's strengths and inflate her power in the sexual marketplace. Day game leveled the playing field. Day game bypasses the natural defenses women raise in frenetic bar and club environments. In clubs, a woman's attention, her spontaneous movements of attention, are subject to intense distraction and competition from loud music, flashing lights, her friends, and other horny guys. Meeting a woman when her mind is relatively calm is a welcome relief. Assuming a level of competence, a day gamer can more efficiently display his value to a woman. I day gamed for 7 years and reached my peak, where motivation, skill, and luck coincided, 4 years in. But after my first year, I was at an intermediate level, getting at least some dates with lovely women. Learning day game is similar to committed gym practice. A lot of newbie gains at the start and a slower progression as you progress from intermediate to advanced. The Pareto principle is universal in skill learning. I met women in London, Prague, New York, Las Vegas, Barcelona, many other cities in Eastern Europe and South America. I would arrive in a new, unconquered city, excited to explore and seek new adventures. At times, my motivation and my right-mindedness felt unstoppable. I was loving life. There are many times on sunny, vibrant spring days that almost half of the dozen or so attractive women I approached were willing to give me their contact details and agree, at least in the moment, to meet again. Naturally, when day gaming in a new country, I would wonder if my improved results were determined less by day game than by other factors, such as the excitement of being somewhere new and improving my vibe, or my foreignness making me more interesting to local women. So I decided to test it against a less strenuous way of meeting new women. As an experiment, I extended the same amount of effort to whichever was the most popular dating app in my area of travel. I uploaded my best photos and created the highest value proposition profile I could muster. The result? I received almost zero interest from women. I even paid for all the gold bells and platinum whistles offered by each app's premium membership programs. To be fair, I was only swiping for women at least a decade younger than me, but that made my online target demographic the same as my offline, and thus a more controlled experiment. My peers report similarly dismal results. In comparison, by day gaming in the analog world, I can often short-circuit all the acculturated discrimination in women's minds and take them on instant coffee dates 10 minutes after introducing myself. Getting a woman's contact details is only the first step in the process towards intimacy, and all day gamers will experience the disappointments of fleeking. To successfully convert a proportion of your leads into romantic relationships requires more than just the courage to approach and initiate flirtatious conversations with contagious positive emotions. Nonetheless, leading others to feel great in our company, opening them up, is something of a superpower in this world starved of right-mindedness. As highly social primates, our mirror neurons are the key. People tend to gravitate towards others with authority or confidence, or those with more powerful emotions. We all possess brain neurons that mirror the behaviors of others, and so we, the observer, are susceptible to the emotional influence of others. This has also been called the law of state transference. Women are particularly susceptible to joyful masculine flirtation. This heavily influencing positivity effect was a skill at which my mentor, Victor, was effortlessly adept. His great vibes were contagious, and others were swept along by his charisma. I, too, have consistently achieved this influence in dozens of cities. Geography is largely irrelevant. We're all human and respond to fun and flirtatious lightheartedness with complicit positivity. In day game, we call this vibe. A keen day gamer will actively put himself into a highly contagious positive mental state before approaching women. This creates an attractive glow. The women are drawn to the warmth of the stranger and enjoy the interaction. Adding right-mindedness to the mix is thrown fuel on the fire. My traveling street seducer lifestyle may sound controversial for the uninitiated. Most of us cold approached using the London day game model, which systematizes the mechanics of a cold approach into distinct stages: introducing yourself to a woman and being direct about your attraction, making a cold read assumption stack about her, sharing some lighthearted social banter, encouraging her to invest in the conversation, and then closing, inviting her on a date. For the best introduction to the London day game model, including a detailed and practical nuts and bolts strategy for handling dates, I recommend Nick Krauser's textbook, Day Game Mastery. London itself was one of the toughest cities for me to master socially. The levels of left-mindedness are off the scale, perhaps due to its bustling urban sprawl and population adversely selected for high-achieving, money and status-minded individuals. If there ever was a city that needed freedom from the labyrinth, it's London, followed closely by New York. After these metropolises, day gaming in less frenetic and more homogeneous cities, like Warsaw and Prague, felt significantly more peaceful and appealing. But by doing time and learning day game in the toughest environments, I developed very outgoing social skills despite being a naturally timid introvert. I developed the psychological fortitude to deal with a lot of rejection. I was able to diminish the grip of my ego and enjoy my first taste of a new kind of confidence. In addition to my volcano guiding year in Guatemala with Victor, it was a coming-of-age period in my life. In the end, the toil and frustration that arises from submitting to deep transformation were all very worthwhile. It was the most fertile ground upon which to develop my confidence, my equanimity, and, the secret sauce, my joyful vibe. As alluded to above, seasoned day gamers are acutely aware of the outsized importance of having a joyful vibe when meeting strangers. We call it hitting state. It's a phenomenon of day game that each successive approach in a single session will tend to be better than the last, as mind and body loosen up and ease into it. As the session progresses, the ego recedes further into the background, and a feeling of right-minded liberation eclipses the regular confinement of the left. You'll hear day gamers say things like, "I really feel alive doing this." When you have a way to consistently enter a state of right-mindedness, you suddenly understand how dull and subtly claustrophobic your regular left-mind-dominated existence really is. This often makes day game an addictive behavior. An outsider would perhaps assume that day gamers are addicted to the outcomes of the sessions, namely increased romantic involvement with women. However, day gamers are more excited by the process of day game. It's precisely the flow state of feeling alive that motivates day gamers to continue cold approaching, despite the frequently difficult emotional roller coaster that it involves. Heinrich Harder, in his book 7 Years in Tibet, described the experience of climbing in the following terms. When you're climbing, your mind is clear and free from all confusions. You have focus, and suddenly the light becomes sharper, the sounds are richer, and you're filled with the deep, powerful presence of life. That matches my frame of mind when I was flirting with all those attractive strangers. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, a Hungarian-American psychologist who has extensively studied the concept of flow, describes it as being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies, every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. His theory is that people enjoy conscious experience the most when they're in a state of flow, completely absorbed by the activity at hand. Csikszentmihalyi argues that it's a component of happiness. But is a flow state, as defined by Csikszentmihalyi, our key to happiness and contagious positivity when meeting and dating women? Unfortunately, flow has its limitations. Getting in the zone isn't the easiest and most accessible of states, especially for introverts in social situations. Many people go to great lengths to pursue extreme sports, the arts, or even lean into danger to achieve the necessary level of absorbed focus to reach flow. If you have a career which you are so passionate about that flow is your consistent friend, then you are among the fortunate few. But good luck attempting to port that flow to a flirtatious bad boy conversation with a ball-busting hottie. Flow state is dependent on a level of skill that's matched to a degree of challenge. For example, as a climber, the difficulty of the slope must be more or less equal to your skill level in climbing it. If the incline is too shallow or the rock face too formidable, you won't achieve a flow state. Likewise, if you're talking to a woman and you feel she's out of your league, you won't feel entitled to behave attractively around her, and your personality will be inhibited. Conversely, if you aren't particularly attracted to a woman, you won't even feel motivated to try. The sweet spot to unlocking flow is a matched challenge to skill level. The limiting factor to hitting this Goldilocks zone is that we need circumstances to align to unlock flow. We're not in control of circumstances in the exterior world, and so we shouldn't rely on circumstances for achieving sustainable happiness. So, back to the drawing board and taking a fresh look. What we need is a first principles solution to flow-like happiness. We need reliable, on-tap access to a flow-like state that's independent of conditions. Imagine if you could bottle flow state and take a refreshing swig whenever you want it. It can be a very powerful feeling, especially when approaching an attractive woman or being the source of great vibes within your relationships with others. A man in a flirtatious flow state can be irresistibly charismatic because he's feeling great. It would be far easier for women to get swept along by his playfulness into her own temporary flow state. As we discussed in Chapter 3, Powerlifting for the Mind, what we aim to achieve in our samatha meditation is tranquility of mind, or calm abiding. There's a very strong link between a high degree of concentration and a calm mind. A mind in a concentrated state is more unified and less fractured, as fewer competing subconscious processes jostle for conscious attention. A simple metaphor is the surface of a lake. Some hindrances to the mind are like pebbles or stones of various sizes thrown into the lake, producing impacts of overlapping concentric circles that disturb the surface. Without these disturbances, the lake surface of your conscious mind will eventually become calm and peaceful. Adding to the metaphor, we can take water quality into account. Is the water fresh and vibrant, or polluted by contaminants? A mind that's both free of disturbances and free of impurities is a naturally peaceful and joyful mind. Happiness is the removal of hindrances. The Buddha identified 5 hindrances that we must deal with: desire, aversion, sloth, restlessness or worry, and doubt. All 5 hindrances are aggravated by and at the mercy of our left-mindedness. Our fickle attention is so easily captured by cravings for something or someone, desire. Conversely, circumstances that we resist will, in turn, irresistibly backfire and become attention velcro, aversion. Procrastination and laziness occur when we wallow in resistance, are unable to zoom out, leverage the broader purpose, and find motivation in our labor, sloth. Too many repetitive, ruminating thoughts make us unable to appreciate the completeness of the moment and end up amplifying our anxieties, restlessness, and worry. And with a fragmented perception, it becomes easier to forget our convictions and harder to acknowledge the big picture benefits of our struggle, doubt. Meditation dissolves hindrances. It forces you to deal with your own mental disturbances and impurities. Attempting to cultivate a calm, abiding mind is so challenging because a lifetime of having our attention kicked around and hijacked by inner and outer forces has left us feeble. During a typical novice meditation session, consciousness is buffeted relentlessly by irresistible, swirling currents within the mind that attempt to resist and sabotage the practice. This is yet another reason why meditation is so powerful. It forces you to confront mind hindrances in the toughest of environments. The tougher the environment, the more potential for growth. The gloves are off when you attempt to pacify the dark forces of your own mind. A novice, unskilled approach is to attempt to force the mind into surrendering into calm. This will backfire. A slow war of attrition will waste even more time. Rather than trying to beat your mind into submission, the key is to not resist, suppress, or chastise yourself for having these hindrances. We all have them. They're part of the human condition and are deeply ingrained. The skillful approach is found in strengthening the opposing state of mind. We seek acceptance, not struggle. The most powerful antidote to the hindrances is to become a skilled right-minder. It's not the be-all and end-all of strategies, because there are many subtleties you'll learn in your meditation journey to overcome hindrances. But in terms of overall investment, cultivating your own self-awareness, your right-mindedness, will bring you the greatest reward. This strategy, like all things truly worthwhile, requires more training than a reliance on hoping circumstances will align, luck, to allow you to access flow. But once you achieve a degree of skill or mastery, you will have attained a power that's sustainable and repeatable, which prevents the mind from consistently self-sabotaging its own naturally at rest, peaceful joy. If we can reliably produce this state within ourselves at will, we can also influence others to drop their left-minded, labyrinthine social barriers. With personality expression that's free from inhibiting hindrances, joy arises, and our personality is infused with an irresistibly positive vibe. Everyone wants to hang out with happy, engaging people who know how to put them at ease and make them laugh. Chapter 6, Purification, Vishuddhi, for errors and failure. Embrace your failures with courage, learn from your errors, and allow the tough nature of reality to strip away your comforts and delusions. The journey to attractive masculinity is one of purification through tough experiences. During my day game career, I've endured well more than 2,000 rejections from women. In total, from my early novice and clueless approaches to achieving a degree of mastery, less than 1/10 of my approaches ended in some combination of a date, a lay, a relationship, or a friendship. Women politely excuse themselves for my daytime approaches, never respond to my texts, friend zone me on dates, and all manner of other forms of resistance to sexual and emotional intimacy. It sounds brutal, right? The results are similar for other seasoned day gamers. If the odds are stacked so heavily against us, why do we even bother trying? Because there's no reason to take those rejections personally. I struggle to recall the countless rejections. Instead, only the successes shine brightly in my mind. I have great memories and friendships with women that persist to this day. Furthermore, it was the errors and the failures that helped me forge my right-minded masculinity. The failures, much more than the successes, made me into the man I am today, and I would never trade that. On your journey to becoming a right-minder, failing and learning from errors and feedback will be one of your greatest allies. This may sound obvious, so obvious that we might end up dismissing it. If you're being courageous and leaning beyond your comfort zone, errors and failure are inevitable. But how might we reframe failure into something we embrace to achieve sexual and spiritual nirvana? Neuroplasticity is the key. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our brains to adapt and undergo structural reorganization over the course of our lives. Knowing how to trigger this mechanism is analogous to a limitless pill. You'll have the ability to deeply learn from experience at an accelerated rate. A child's brain is considerably more plastic than an adult's brain. If you're under 25, you may still have a few good years left in you to enjoy the savage benefits of your brain's plasticity. Use those remaining years wisely. And what hope is there for those of us over 25? The key to accessing an optimal state for neuroplastic changes to occur lies in your subjective experience. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscience professor and lab director at Stanford University School of Medicine, explains on his podcast how neuroplasticity can be activated. Plasticity as an adult can be as dramatic, as robust as it is in a young person, provided that there's a serious incentive for the plasticity to occur. And this is absolutely important to understand, that how badly we need or want the plasticity determines how fast that plasticity will arrive. Interacting with women we find desirable and really wanting a date to go well is the ideal condition with which to trigger this deep learning. Desire is serious business. Our brains, masters of self-deception, tell us that this one woman could solve all our problems because she's just so damned hot. Meeting and dating desirable women will obviously feel more emotionally significant in the moment than trying to learn some conversational fringe. The second key to leveraging neuroplasticity is to embrace failure and frustration, both of which you will encounter if you're fully committed to the masculine meditations journey. This process isn't simply doing a couple of approaches or dates and then moving on to the next shiny self-help book. You should be leaning into your masculine edge, taking actions beyond your comfort zone. This will not only increase your opportunities, but also trigger deep learning. Neuroplasticity thrives in people who persist through frustration. Finally, if you can learn to attach those frustrations and failures to a sense of masculine accomplishment, you have the golden ticket. Dopamine is released when we subjectively sense that we're taking the correct course of action towards achieving a goal. You must acknowledge your own courageousness in taking masculine right action and know that your failures are leading you on the right track to success. You should have the mindset of, that was awesome, because I had the balls to do it. Huberman explains how to leverage dopamine, the go-get-it molecule, in our favor. Making failures repetitively, provided we're engaged in a very specific set of behaviors when we do it, as well as telling ourselves that those failures are good for learning and good for us, creates an outsized effect on the rate of plasticity. It accelerates plasticity. Dopamine is released according to what we subjectively believe is good for us, and that is what is so powerful about it. When you receive pushback from the world, persevering with grit, determination, and a positive fortitude will lead to deep transformation. From a meditator's point of view, persisting through frustration with a balanced attitude, equanimity, is the path to awakening. Whether you resonate more with the language of the Western scientists, the ancient Stoics of the Mediterranean, or the ascetic mystics of Buddhism, all perspectives lead to proverbial Rome. The transformational journey can be long and arduous, but a favorite quote of mine from the author of 7 Years in Tibet, Harold Harrer, sums up the power of taking the journey. In the country where I'm traveling, Tibet, people believe if they walk long distances to holy places, it purifies the bad deeds they've committed. They believe the more difficult the journey, the greater the depth of purification. Chapter 7, Non-Self, Anatta, for non-self confidence. An ego must constantly defend itself, prove its own self-worth, and compare itself to others. If you reduce your attachment to the sense of self, an authentic confidence arises from a more right-minded awareness. The entire world wants more self-confidence, but if we take a deep look into how core confidence arises and is expressed, what the world really needs is more non-self-confidence. In non-self-confidence, the self aspect of our conscious experience is diminished. Non-self-confidence is free of the burdensome gravity of the ego. As the ego diminishes, it's replaced by ease and confidence. This confidence arises from a deep intuitive vulnerability to and acceptance of the flow of being. In contrast, when people say they're self-confident, what they're typically referring to is that the person has confidence in certain situations. For example, we feel confident at work because of our specialized professional experience, or when socializing, because we're surrounded by a peer group of accepting friends. In these situations, we may feel very comfortable in our own skin because of our left-minded narrative that we are in control of our situation. However, change our context into one that's uncertain and or even subtly threatening to our egos, and our confidence is suddenly nowhere to be found. We express a different personality as our self-confidence in various situations fluctuates. The ego, our insecure and petulant inner child, is inherently emotionally fragile. Its existence is grounded in self-preservation and glorification in a demanding and very cynical left-minded world. When it comes down to women, our confidence problem is fundamentally based on our own perceived self-worthiness in comparison to how we perceive her value. It's a value comparison we instantly create in our minds. A sense of worthiness is similar to a situational confidence in that it's this game of comparisons that dictates how much confidence our ego minds allow us to unlock. Feeling enough self-worth is one of the most reliable ways of allowing ourselves to behave attractively around a woman. Imagine meeting a very attractive woman whom you immediately perceive as having much higher social status and sexual value than you. If your confidence is based on perceived self-worth compared to her value, your body language and your verbal game will at best remain neutral and, at worst, shut you down and make you awkward. We're all familiar with being on dates where we feel just lucky to be there and how difficult it is to act normally and, conversely, how relaxed and assured we feel when the tables are turned and we sense the woman is feeling lucky to be dating us. From a big picture evolutionary psychology point of view, this is a smart move on the part of Mother Nature. The psychology of entitlement ensures that only males with the highest social status will be able to pass their genes on to the next generation. And, of course, it's women themselves that sexually select for high-status men. Everyone involved is thoroughly complicit in these sexual market dynamics. In social situations, Only tribe members with the highest social value are permitted to unlock the full potential of their personality and behave with maximum attractiveness. Let's consider the case of Howard Hughes, the exceptionally successful billionaire from the first half of the 20th century. Leonardo DiCaprio played him in the 2004 Martin Scorsese movie, The Aviator, a biographical drama about Howard Hughes during the 1930s and 40s. Hughes was the original genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, and the initial inspiration for Iron Man. In his prime, Howard Hughes was the most colorful man of his time. But he was also an eccentric, and the later years of his life were plagued by an out-of-control obsessive-compulsive disorder. He became a shell of his former self, a recluse with deep social anxiety issues. Imagine yourself as a young Howard Hughes. You're at the pinnacle of social status. Imagine yourself at the after-party of a movie premiere, one of your sure-to-be Oscar-nominated Hollywood productions. You meet a young, vivacious Katharine Hepburn, already a leading A-list actress. Your immediate instinct upon meeting Miss Hepburn is, I want her. Of course, for Howard Hughes, this conquest is already a foregone conclusion. But now, let's introduce an unusual trick of fate. Everyone attending the party has been stricken with selective amnesia, including the lovely Miss Hepburn. No one has any recollection of your considerable fame. You're still Howard Hughes, but the name has lost its social power. The party guests just see you as you are, without any preconceptions derived from your reputation. Will you still behave confidently in a way that is consistent with your genius, billionaire, playboy status? Stripped of external boosters, can you maintain this identity? We cannot know how the real Hughes would have behaved around Katharine Hepburn in this contrived scenario, but given what we know of his underlying anxiety issues, it would be reasonable to conclude that his level of self-worth around women would have been ego-based and dependent upon his considerable social status, rather than an internally generated feature of his personality. Take away his reputation, and you take away the external feedback that supports his ego's narrative. As people acted indifferently towards him, his ego would have stifled his personality and triggered all of his social anxiety issues. Quite possibly, his drive to accumulate power and fame was an overcompensation for the social anxiety he felt at his core. Perhaps Hughes would have shut down completely at this amnesiac party, leaving only a timid young man anxiously seeing the closest exit. This hypothetical scenario highlights the inherent problem with chasing self-confidence and self-esteem. It is all left-minded, ego-based, and inherently fragile. Non-self-confidence is our solution. This more rarefied type of confidence is independent of any given situation or a feeling of relative worthiness when interacting with women. Some men, through good fortune or less emasculating social conditioning growing up, naturally possess this innate confidence in most situations, such as my early mentor, Victor. If we ourselves could suddenly tap directly into our egoless right-mindedness and suppress our left brains, could we embody this non-self-confidence and behave with effortless ease around otherwise intimidating, attractive women? Yes, we have that potential. With a rock-solid work ethic and by training ourselves in the correct way. To help us understand how non-self-confidence works, let's use another artificial intelligence analogy, specifically autonomous driving technologies. This may seem like a tangent, but consider that driverless cars face the same basic confidence issues that we face. They must have a destination, and they will reach that destination with the most direct and efficient path, doing so safely and self-driving confidently. At the beginning of the 20s, there are two main competing philosophies for solving autonomous driving: the Waymo-like approach, a subsidiary of Google, and the Tesla-like approach, a subsidiary of Elon Musk. The Waymo-like approach is analogous to situational-based self-confidence. It relies on a high-definition, predefined map of the city streets on which it's permitted to drive. The challenge for this technology is that it can only drive in areas for which it has a detailed, predefined map. This is how we operate in left-mindedness. Our confidence is dependent on the sense of certainty we have in our learned mapping of the world from past experiences. The left hemisphere of our brain is excellent at establishing pattern responses to our reference experiences. Our neurological circuitry has been programmed since birth to strengthen the neurological pathways that have worked for us in the past and to reinforce those pattern responses. Our minds, in effect, become almost rigid in our mapping of the world and the route in which we persistently navigate. The advantage is that we can quickly and efficiently behave on autopilot. How have your experiences added up to shape your map of the world? How many limitations does your ego-based geofencing place on your behavioral range? Edge cases in the world of autonomous driving are unpredictable circumstances that the computer doesn't yet know how to deal with. How does the Waymo car respond when an attractive passenger in a revealing red dress would like to be taken to a fun and adventurous destination that's outside the rigid, geofenced area for which it's entitled to travel? It cannot. The Waymo car will be impotent and quite the letdown. The Tesla autonomous vehicle, however, doesn't rely on a map. There are no predetermined geofencing boundaries for those vehicles. Instead, a Tesla will form a real-time, constantly changing perception of its circumstances. A Tesla car lives in the moment, fully present. The Tesla autonomy will, in principle, be capable of driving on any road on the planet and in almost any weather condition. For our purposes of achieving non-self-confidence, this is where awareness-based mindfulness comes in. A meditation practice is essentially a feedback loop for achieving greater attention and awareness in the present moment. Cetanā meditation expands the bandwidth of our consciousness, just as the artificial intelligence within the Tesla car must form an accurate perception of reality in the present moment. Greater mindfulness is greater perception and processing power for both the AI and our own biological neural nets. Extending this metaphor, can we unpack how Tesla are training their AI to confidently deal with unexpected or challenging situations for which it's not accustomed? Dealing with these so-called edge cases is the key. Edge cases are reference experiences that likely ended in some degree of failure. This is the territory where geofenced confidence and ego-based confidence fear to tread. How should the car proceed in uncertain circumstances? How should you proceed on a date if a woman's behavior, her attraction signals, are ambiguous? How should you react when, after diving in for the kiss, she deftly deflects your attempt with her cheek? The engineers and the automated learning algorithms are rigorous in identifying and overcoming these obstacles. Dealing with edge cases is the decisive strategy to winning the race to universally confident autonomous vehicles. But does this mean that we need to overcome all edge cases in dating to one day achieve this rarefied form of universal non-self-confidence? Fortunately, no. Our human intuition still far exceeds any form of intuition that artificial intelligence might currently possess. Whereas artificial neural networks need to be trained through brute force with thousands of cases, our general intelligence, our narrating minds, are fantastically superior at inferring the big picture context and applying probable solutions. While a machine neural net may need hundreds or thousands of edge cases of experience, we may only need a single hard lesson learned to avoid making the same or similar mistake twice. The key is the willingness to embrace the tough lessons that life will inevitably throw at us when we're acting courageously. One of the deepest lessons we can learn is found when we're leaning into our masculine edge. In our modern world, safe and civilized, there are rarely negative social consequences when we act boldly. Quite the opposite. Our brain circuitry habitually amplifies the fear of potential negative consequences. We're hardwired with a negativity bias that's designed to keep us out of danger. But in our modern world, in which everyone is acculturated to left-mindedness, all is safe and sanitized, and consequences are minor. A woman's boyfriend won't suddenly appear from behind a bush and bash you in the back of the head with a rock just for talking to her. This might have happened back on the savannah, but it's extremely unlikely today. Your inhibiting anxiety is the anticipation of negative consequences, rejection, and being judged. In reality, rejection will be polite and subtle, not overt and hostile. And if we embrace the path to non-self-confidence, we discover that acting boldly in line with our masculinity, regardless of the end outcome, we feel a deep sense of manly fulfillment. We're rewarded for our confidence with this realization: that was awesome because I had the balls to do it. Exploring non-self-confidence has taken us down the rabbit hole of left-minded metaphors, but like all insights, your brain needs proof, not promises. You can intellectually understand non-self-confidence and appreciate its significance, but feeling it is a different matter. It must be understood by your subconscious at a deep, intuitive level. It is a journey. Ultimately, all you need is a solid, awareness-based meditation practice combined with an active social and dating life in which you're leaning just slightly beyond your comfort zone. It's here you'll encounter the valuable edge cases and gain lasting insight into the masculine fulfillment that comes from being bold. Non-self-confidence is attainable with patience, diligence, and courage. It will be one of the best investments in time that you ever make, an immeasurably valuable insight that you can carry with you for the rest of your life. Chapter 8, Impermanence, Anicca, for non-self-expression. Let go of your efforts to present an attractive facade and make a great impression. Authenticity is all about the courage to own and be comfortably equanimous with whatever flavor of personality arises and allowing that to express itself. One of the first obvious questions an introvert newbie might ask about meeting and dating women is, but what should I talk about on the date? My initial practical response might be to first warn him of what to avoid talking about. Avoid bragging or attempting to impress your date with your intellectual worldview. Don't attempt to divulge your entire life story. It sounds so obvious, but our left-minded habits are both sticky and leaky, even when we subjectively believe our game is flowing and tight. I've certainly failed these basic dating no-nos countless times. All the conventional dating wisdom for men about what not to discuss on a date will typically fall into the category of left-mindedness. Instead, what you're seeking with your non-self-confidence and great vibe is to lead her to a place of right-mindedness. Right-mindedness involves leading the disengagement of her logical circuitry. You should be taking her rational mind at least partially offline, not as a manipulation, but because she would really enjoy the ride if she's attracted to you. So, what should you talk about? Questions and topics of conversation should be unpredictable, challenging, and flirtatiously creative. What's your guilty pleasure? What do you think of guys from my country? Do you like strawberries? But there's a large caveat with this kind of advice. While you can rote learn these kind of surface-level recommendations about which topics to avoid and which topics to approach, you may already be harming your true potential. As a complete novice who needs some dating experience under his belt, it may be fine to start with learning some of the essentials of good game, but removing the training wheels should be a priority. Delivering pickup lines, or so-called canned material, is the very last thing you should be ruminating over before or during a date. Women are sensitive to inauthenticity and will feel creeped out by it. Instead of striving to think, rationalize, and verbalize our way into a woman's bedroom, we should instead allow our charismatic masculinity to express itself naturally. Authenticity will arise spontaneously when we feel aroused, carefree, and open without self-judgment. But is it not an observable truth that women are more attracted to certain personality types than others? And can we use role models to inspire and modify our personality expression for the better? Can I attempt to express Tyler Durden's decisive intensity, James Bond's enigmatic suaveness, Bill Burr's gruff comic savagery, or become a bumbling but charming bad boy like Californication's Hank Moody? Masculine Meditations is about discovering our essential masculine authenticity, so attempting to emulate someone could hinder your potential. The methods and mindsets of the mentors in the previous chapters are intended to be catalysts for our own unique and deep transformation. But what does it mean to be authentic and have an authentic personality? Let's first examine how a personality manifests. One of the first things we learn when meditating is just how little control we have over the movements of our own minds. How content spontaneously bubbles up into consciousness, how our attention will compulsively fixate on the juiciest thoughts that arise, and how we so easily get lost in meandering loops of thought. The so-called monkey mind and mind wandering are among the first novice challenges we must deal with on the meditation cushion. If this agitation and rumination of the mind is something of a default for modern humans, these states are the foundation upon which our personalities manifest. A key insight is to intellectually and eventually intuitively understand that you aren't in control of your personality. In a sense, personality arises from emptiness and passes away from the natural flow of impermanence. Both emptiness and impermanence are key overarching concepts in Buddhism. There's no executive nexus of control within your mind that's dictating the arising and the passing away. The inner boss, our egoic self, is an intricate narrative illusion created by our left mind language to give us a convincing sense of cognitive cohesion. As the meditation master Culadasa describes in The Mind Illuminated, the mind is a collection of mental processes operating through either consensus or a very temporary dominance of one process over the others. In terms of personality expression, a James Bondish persona might be occupying the I role for a short time, but as an exterior social interaction progresses, its dominance will soon be usurped by another collection of thought processes. Just moments later, the person might find himself expressing a more Tyler Durden-ish personality type. Authenticity is all about the courage to own and be comfortably equanimous with whatever flavor of personality arises and allowing that to express itself. If we allow our right-mindedness to shine, we allow our non-self expression to flow without inhibition or judgment. The less friction and the more consensus your mind processes achieve, the more authentically you will express yourself in the outer world. Of course, the caveat is that you shouldn't become so immersed in right-mindedness that you become socially weird, but this should be the least of your concerns, as the gravity of the left-mindedness is considerably stronger than your ability to resist it. And what if you are of the firm conviction that the collective bundle of mind processes jostling around inside your brain are all unattractive? Nothing worthwhile, you lament, let alone anything authentically attractive, is arising and passing away. Become less self-critical. Let go of your judgments and comparisons, and instead, allow your meditation practice to guide you. As your mind gradually begins to lessen its grip on self-judgment, put your best foot forward and gradually get some dating experiences. Developing your joyful vibe, your masculine rhythm, and your equanimity in social situations will further compound your progress over time. Your commitment to the journey will eventually draw out a unique personality expression that's authentic. Authentic communication is a scarce and valuable resource in this day and age. Chapter 9, Intention, Cetanā, for intent and calibration. Use meditation as a tool for training your mind for greater self-awareness and masculine intention. Knowing how to skillfully play your part in the intimacy dance with self-awareness and the actions that arise from calibrated intention will set you apart from other men. Your masculinity is bullish when unleashed. If you're still on the introverted side, with relatively little experience with women, and typically hesitant on dates, You may not realize how much you yourself are restraining your innate masculinity. However, once you learn how to escalate physicality on dates and intuitively understand that it is this intention to try which creates attraction, you'll have the opposite problem. Women will perceive you as too bullish, overly confident, and cocky. This may serve you well on the actual date. Intimacy may happen faster as women are swept up in the magic of the moment. But after the date, when her left mind comes back online, you may be easily dismissed as just too playerish, too untamed for serious consideration as a boyfriend. First, we must develop strong intention and follow through with courage. When we're confident enough in our own masculinity, we must learn to calibrate. Calibration is a maturation of strong intention. Purposeful intention, having conviction and the drive to make desirable things happen, is a masculine trait. Masculine energy projects outwards, is direct, and penetrates the world proactively. Feminine energy is directed inwards, is nurturing and receiving. Your masculine drive is tempered by many other elements of your character, not least by your inhibiting left-mindedness. But masculine intention is a key driver throughout the dating and seduction process. Intention and action are involved in the entire process, from approaching and meeting a woman in the beginning, to initiating a flirtatious interaction, to inviting her on a date, to increasing intimacy, leading to the bedroom, and all the way to a relationship. All these transitions will require you, as a man, to lead her to increase your mutual intimacy. Without this drive, nothing will happen. The feminine is a predominantly nurturing and receiving energy. In 90% of cases, a woman won't initiate an escalation of intimacy. That's all on you. If you don't have powerful intentions and the courage to follow through with action, you'll likely have boring interactions or dates that go nowhere and get friend-zoned. That said, it's inaccurate to describe dating and seduction as a linear process from hello to bedroom and beyond. As men, we like to think logically in terms of reaching a destination in a straight line from A to B. However, seduction is more like a dance, the ebb and flow of increasing levels of intimacy. Dancing is a socially acceptable form of proxy seduction. Intention, applied successfully, is leading a woman through the dance, but there are many subtleties along the way. When it comes to dating, it can't be all non-stop pull in one direction by the masculine. The interaction must be allowed to breathe with simple fun and building trust and comfort before you again attempt to increase the level of intimacy. Too much intention, too fast, will trigger all manner of undesirable resistance in a woman if she isn't ready. She must trust and be comfortable enough with you and your bullish masculinity to allow greater intimacy. Awareness is absolutely key here as a precursor to social and emotional intelligence about how to use your masculine intention appropriately. Awareness about when to apply your intention and when to ease off the accelerator is vital. This is called calibration. Extending the metaphor of the dance, you could liken a dating rhythm to that of capoeira, an Afro-Brazilian martial art disguised as dance and rhythm. It was created by indigenous and African slaves in Brazil in the 15th century to conceal that they were sparring and developing their martial art. The fight, or the play, the interaction between the masculine and the feminine, happens in the sub-communication. The greater your ability to lead the dance is, driven by your masculine rhythm, the deeper the connection you will ultimately form with the woman. You must covertly increase intimacy, then relax into comfort and right-mindedness. Allow her to counter with her congruence tests, deal with them equanimously, and then repeat the cycle when your sense of calibration prompts you to apply more masculine intention. This process, capoeira dating of masculine intent, feminine evaluation, and equanimous calm, may repeat many times as your relationship with a woman deepens. The problem, however, is that if you really like a woman, It's all too easy to fall into a puppy dog-like mode of basking in the attention that she's giving you during the date. You may end up following her cues and allowing her to take the frame and subtly lead the interaction. Because you are predominantly left-minded, you'll often not have the conscious awareness to know when to apply intention, equanimity, and calibration. You may essentially be on autopilot during the date, lulled into a nice, comfortable flow state conversation, simply grateful for the opportunity to receive that precious female attention. It's a trap. If you have little experience, this masculine rhythm may seem quite daunting, but with a meditation practice, this rhythm will feel familiar. Meditation will build both your intention and conscious awareness. The early stages of samatha meditation is a continual process of forgetting to keep your attention on the breath, getting lost in daydreams and rumination, spontaneously regaining the self-awareness that the breath has been lost, and then calibrating your intention to refocus on the breath. It's a continuous rhythm of reinforcing positive behaviors in the mind, of a stronger mind in which right-minded awareness can appropriately direct the flow of left-minded attention. This cycle of intention, loss of awareness, regaining self-awareness, and then recalibrating is the engine by which you can develop a strong mind and the core attributes of your masculinity. Through meditation, you can build self-awareness and intention from the ground up, and then apply these strengths to your interactions with women. You will more accurately identify where you are in the interaction, whether it's time to verbally flirt or initiate some physical contact, or whether it's time to lean back, enjoy the conversation, and build trust and comfort. Meditation, in a sense, is a spiritual dance instructor. Chapter 10, Equanimity, Upekkha, for solidity. Your reactivity under stress, however subtle, will reveal a lot about you. Women will test the solidity of your character and masculinity as they instinctively throw up barriers to intimacy. If you pass, her attraction may increase, but if you fail and become reactive and defensive, you're disqualifying yourself. Equanimity must be mastered. 25 centuries ago, in the time of the Buddha, asceticism was a common practice in India. The basic principle was that pain and deprivation were purifiers of the soul. The Buddha was said to have undergone many years of asceticism in his journey towards enlightenment, but he eventually abandoned the practice in favor of one of his key discoveries and contributions to meditation, equanimity. Shinzen Yun, a prominent American meditation teacher and the author of The Science of Enlightenment, has defined equanimity as the radical non-interference with the natural flow of sensory experience. In practical terms, this means that with equanimity, you don't become overreactive and freak out over the events unfolding in your life. By developing the skill of equanimity, you'll develop a robust emotional immune system. As an inevitable consequence of left-minded life, we all naturally experience varying degrees of pain or negative life circumstances. Our left-minded conscious perception of the world is only an imperfect facsimile of the real world, and therefore it's flawed. It's your mind's limited interpretation and abstractification of an immensely rich and complex reality. When we're operating with imperfect information, our ego minds inevitably create agitation and other hindrances when this imperfect perception doesn't bring it the satisfaction it craves. When the world doesn't meet your expectations, suffering arises. Our suffering isn't caused by physical pain or circumstances themselves, but rather by the agitation and reactivity that our minds create in response. It's our reaction to the stimulus that matters. Pain in life is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. That statement sums up the majority of my retirement investment strategy. Aging is a terminal disease that affects all of us, and for which we still don't have a cure. As the body deteriorates and loved ones pass away, suffering is a huge extra burden. Some people grow old with grace, but still more develop a resigned brittleness to their failing faculties. All this suffering is optional. By meditating daily, we invest in the skill of equanimity, which is a powerful antidote to mind-generated suffering. Of course, we have more immediate goals. Our challenge in dating isn't so much mind suffering itself, but behaving reactively. It's the reactivity that can sabotage our progress with women. Reactivity is instinctual and unskilled. We can judge ourselves or be judged harshly for our instinctual reactivity, which is unfair. Our innate brain circuitry is built to overreact to potential threats and negativity. From the perspective of evolutionary biology, it's far better for a hominoid's brain to exaggerate a potential threat and overreact than to risk being eaten. Because we no longer live on the savannah, this vestigial overreactivity is far more of a curse than a gift. In our modern world, reactivity can be as obvious as furious road rage, or as subtle as a brief lapse in our outward composure as a woman tests our masculinity. Learning equanimity, the antidote to reactivity, has been one of my life's biggest challenges. I always had a short temper. Reflecting on my past behaviors, it amazes me that I didn't get into more trouble than I did. The Mr. Hyde inside me was aggressive and explosive and left my kindly Dr. Jekyll in the aftermath, mortified by his actions. If I felt trapped in a stressful situation with no clear means of escape, a storm of inner anxiety would boil up and paralyze me. These sudden panic attacks have sometimes made me unable to do my job at critical moments. When it came to women, without liquid courage, I would pretty much miserably fail every test they threw at me. The default solution, in the aftermath of all this reactivity, was to capitulate, make my humiliated excuses, and go home. Fortunately, if we're prepared to face the truth of our shortcomings and work diligently to overcome them, we have a fighting chance to turn things around. Post-traumatic growth often turns our greatest weaknesses into our greatest strengths. One particularly powerful reminder to myself about the importance of equanimity was an experience I had many years ago on a beach in northern Peru. I was staying at a resort in an idyllic Pacific beach town. I wanted to find an isolated spot where I could practice my chosen sport, karate, without the local beachgoers gawking at me. As a pale-skinned gringo, I was already the subject of more than enough attention. As I jogged about a kilometer up the coast away from the resort, I was warned twice that I shouldn't go any further because of robbers. To be honest, I had a little too much hubris about my ability to defend myself. I ignored their advice and continued along the shoreline. With the waves of the Pacific Ocean splashing at my feet and the overhead sun baking down, I couldn't register the idea of trouble in paradise. When I found a secluded spot, I began my warm-up. I hadn't even begun my katas when two men approached from the dunes, bandanas covering the lower half of their faces. An older man in his late 30s and a younger protege in his early 20s. Perhaps they were father and son. As they came closer, the older man drew out a handgun. It was quite surreal, like I'd suddenly been transported into Westworld. This was the Americas, after all, and many parts of the Andean region can feel like an impoverished Wild West. Money, money, the gunslinger told me. I'd never been confronted with a gun before that moment. I had no money on me at the time, only my apartment keys and phone, which contained important data. Stillness washed over me, and time slowed down. My mind had suddenly been thrust into a state of high concentration. In that place of heightened focus, I was able to notice something peculiar about the muzzle of the gun. It appeared to be blocked. Then, I noticed how worn and pitted the surface of the gun's metal was. A realization hit me. If it were a real gun, it would no longer work in its present blocked and beat-up condition. In my broken Spanish, I calmly told him that I didn't believe his gun was real. He paused, perhaps impressed by my cojones, and accepted my observation reasonably. He pocketed the gun and brought out a large knife, a very real knife. This was clearly not the first time these men had run through this routine. It was a decisive moment. Although I wasn't a beginner martial artist, still, I knew that facing off against two men, one with a large knife, would be very risky. But I wasn't prepared to give up my phone, and even if I'd given up the phone, they may not have believed that I had no money. The best defense was to take my ego out of the equation and get out of that situation fast. I'm a good sprinter and was in good shape. They had both positioned themselves to block my escape up the dunes and down the beach back to the resort. But I saw an opportunity they wouldn't expect. In a sudden burst of movement, I dove low between them and sprinted hard. The older man managed to grab the collar of my shirt at the back of my neck, but I already had the momentum to tear free. I ran, quickly putting distance between myself and them. It was exhilarating. I heard whistling behind me, and the idea that they were signaling other members of their posse spurred me on. That was a scary thought, that other gang members may suddenly appear on the ridge of the dunes. As I ran, dialogue from the movie Fight Club burst into my mind and forced me on through exhaustion, Edward Norton's voice in my head. I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid. Then I ran some more. During that experience years ago, the high state of concentration and equanimity my mind had fallen into was far more lucky happenstance than my essential nature. But equanimity is a skill that can be learned. Equanimity is non-reactivity, a serenity that comes from surrender to the provocative sensations that flood the mind in stressful situations. If you resist the sensations, a storm of reactivity could become overwhelming or at least impair your judgment. Your non-interference with the flow of experience prevents a cocktail of emotional turmoil from multiplying into a blind panic. A key distinction is that the inner surrender creates a concentrated space for mindful thought. With that space, you can more calmly decide a course of action so as not to surrender to the outer situation. Women can be an even greater challenge to our cool composure than men with guns, from a certain point of view. It's the feminine prerogative to test the masculine, and they will do it in covert and subtle ways. An overt equanimity test is easy to deal with, but on a date, you may be continuously failing many subtle tests to your masculinity. Neither you nor your date may be consciously aware of these tests, but they're taking place underneath the surface in the subconscious communication. It's the culmination of all these some surface level judgments that determines how much attraction you'll ultimately feel for each other. In the end, it's just feelings we experience above the surface in consciousness, but those feelings arose from infinitely complex and rapid tidal forces within our big brains. At every level of meeting, dating, and relationships with women, you will encounter these tests. If a woman feels she has a higher sexual market value than you, she will naturally create higher barriers to intimacy. Men in the pickup artist community call these congruence tests, or simply shit testing. A woman will instinctively throw up obstacles to test your masculinity and see if you have your shit together. Can she trust your solidity? A reactive man without grounding in equanimity is less attractive. She'll trust her feelings above all else, because as the gatekeeper of sex, her choices impact the welfare of her potential future children. If she feels she can't trust a man's solidity, how then can she trust his ability to protect her future children? When a man is reactive, this triggers not only a loss of attraction, but also breeds a woman's distrust. This is why equanimity is so important as an antidote to reactivity and as a key component of your masculine solidity. Introducing yourself to a woman for the first time and being direct about what you find attractive about her will trigger a first crucial test. She may politely excuse herself and walk away, which we always accept with equanimity. But if she continues the conversation with you, then it's game on. If she's at least curious about you, she will still be standing in front of you, waiting for you to deliver your performance. She may respond with indifference or overtly challenge your attempts to create a flirtatious conversation. How do you react? Do you react defensively in your body language and tonality and attempt to justify yourself? Or are you able to remain equanimous and own your masculinity? Another obvious barrier to intimacy is attempting to kiss a woman for the first time. This can be a nerve-wracking experience for a man. If the mood is right and your timing is well calibrated, it's worth a try. Even if she really likes you, she may decide in the moment to pull back or deflect your kiss with her cheek. The key here is how you react. Do you remain equanimous, or are you visibly shaken and apologetic in your body language? If you can remain equanimous after a failed kiss attempt, you may even increase her attraction for you. If the context of the interaction is clearly romantic, a woman won't punish a man for trying to increase intimacy. She may not necessarily choose to accept your advances, but if you calibrate it, you don't lose her respect for trying. Indeed, if she really likes you, but you consistently fail to make a move, then she may lose attraction for you. The challenges are never-ending, continuing even during a long-term relationship. She may be suddenly and inexplicably mad at you for some absurdly minor offense, like eating the last avocado. Can you prove to her, not in words, but in behavior, that you are indeed a capable and trustworthy man in difficult situations? Equally, in meditation, the challenge of maintaining equanimity is never-ending. Initially, it's gross aversion, such as the annoyance of having to sit still for longer than 20 minutes, or a dog barking in your peripheral awareness. The tests to your equanimity will become ever more subtle and refined as you progress to greater levels of mindfulness. At the adept stages of samatha meditation, the equanimity challenge is found in not reacting to the natural bliss that arises from a very still and concentrated mind. The challenges of meditation aren't as immediately provocative as having a gun pointing at you or having a woman feigning indignation at your attempt to kiss her. But the underlying skill is trained constantly throughout meditation. It's how you deal with the hindrances, like impatience, dissatisfaction, and self-doubt, that are the subtle challenges to your equanimity. The greater your equanimity in dealing with these subtle hindrances, the more concentration and calm you will cultivate. If you can master these challenges, you will achieve insight into dealing with the more intense outer challenges to your composure. Equanimity, a core skill of meditation, must be a core foundation for your relationships with women. They will reward you for your solid composure. Chapter 11, Unification, Ekāyana-magga, for intimacy. The goal of meditation in the adept stages of samatha is to reach unification of mind, a state of harmony when competing sub-minds pacify and work together for the greater purpose. With your non-self-confidence, great vibe, masculine intent, and vigor all converging, can she finally allow herself to surrender to love? Many men find the final hurdle to reaching the bedroom and sex to be frustrating. The process is messy, fraught with unexpected twists and turns. Heart-soaring moments can rapidly plunge into the heart-wrenching. You're sure that she likes you, but why can't she accept the love you have to give? Perhaps your lower egoic craving mind feels she's playing games or even wasting your time. The dance of seduction is invigorating and fun, but at some point, you may begin to ask yourself why the dance song goes on for so long. These are fundamentally all left-minded frustrations. If your consciousness processes the world in scarcity instead of abundance, your craving will multiply. If your thought processes have a time-bound urgency to them, whose schedule are you at the mercy of? If your conscious mind perceives the world in terms of needing a result instead of relaxing into the process, dissatisfaction is inevitable. Intellectually, we know a sense of completion and fulfillment will always be elusive as we wallow in left-mindedness. If we do grab hold of that sweet sexual abundance for a few moments, our masculine victory lap will be brief. We'll wake up from the chase with sudden post-orgasmic clarity of mind and wonder why that goal was so all-consuming. Then we resolutely decide to get back on the hedonic treadmill. We take a shower, throw on a crisp iron shirt, and return to the start of the labyrinth. What does intimacy really mean? Because samatha meditation is a study of your own consciousness, it provides profound answers to fundamental questions. The answers are intrinsically baked into the committed study and transformation of your consciousness. In the early novice stages of the meditation journey, you must overcome the cycle of intently pursuing the breath, becoming lost in an instant, and then achieving the post-awareness clarity of mind to wonder why your ability to control your thoughts is so weak. As a skilled meditator in the intermediate stages, you gradually succeed in consistently entering right-minded states for longer periods. As an adept in the final stages, the senses are pacified. You experience physical pliancy, intrinsic joy arises, and a process of mind unification takes place. In The Mind Illuminated, Culadasa explains, stages 7 through 10 involve a profound unification of the mind. This doesn't mean the mind somehow fuses into a single monolithic entity. Rather, the many discriminating and sensory subminds start working together in harmony. As you become increasingly intimate with a woman, unification is needed to experience deepening intimacy with true fulfillment. All the fragmented parts of your subconscious need to work together and merge into the moment. But this isn't all about you. With your masculinity, you are also responsible for leading the dance. Her mind must surrender to harmony, her competing subminds pacified and pliant. How incredible would it be if you could both experience this deep merging into right-mindedness and unification? The first step, before seducing someone else's mind, is to first seduce your own mind. This requires you to overcome your mental hindrances and to unify the intentions of your subconscious. Your ability to then lead others into right-mindedness and unification will be significantly easier. One very memorable event during my volcano guiding days was an expedition in which a husband and wife gave a very unusual performance. They were fire dancers and had chosen the rare location of Volcán de Upekkha as the backdrop for their photo shoot together. On the evening of the expedition, as we clambered on the perilous slopes, we were again very fortunate to find a stunning lava flow. It was against this awe-inspiring backdrop and the panoramic horizon of the surrounding lowlands that we were treated to a performance of daring unison. The couple, stripped naked, lit their fire chains and started swinging just 5 meters from the lava. Even to those of us who looked on, the synchronization of the man and woman's movements were mesmerizing. There were no left-minded interruptions in the minds of the group that gathered on the slope that evening. Ultimately, like standing naked together on an active volcano, true intimacy requires genuine unification supported by trust and courage. Chapter 12, The Woman in the Black Dress for Right Action. We constantly face choices in life, often between truth and illusion. Healthy masculinity is the courage to take actions that lead us towards truth. In the original movie, The Matrix, the protagonist Neo is famously offered a choice between a blue pill and a red pill. The blue pill would allow Neo to go on believing whatever he wanted, while the red pill offered the truth. In his excellent book, Why Buddhism is True, Robert Wright identifies The Matrix as a Dharma movie. Dharma here means the nature of reality as taught by the Buddha. The directors of the movie, the Wachowski siblings, gave 3 books to Keanu Reeves before the shooting began. One of those books, The Moral Animal, Why We Are the Way We Are, The New Science of Evolutionary Psychology, was written by Robert Wright himself. The Matrix is clearly heavily influenced by Buddhist philosophy. For an adept meditator, taking the red pill is analogous to seeking enlightenment, freedom from mind-generating suffering. Meditation is a purifying process that gradually strips away delusion and allows us to experience the truth about our conscious experience more completely. Meditation offers a path to awakening, freedom from delusion, and the beginning of the end of suffering. The rabbit hole that Neo follows leads him to Morpheus, who offers him the stark choice between ignorance and truth. When Neo asks, "What truth?" Morpheus explains that you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, into a prison that you cannot taste or see or touch, a prison for your mind. After taking the red pill, Neo discovers that he was actually born into a dystopian nightmare world ruled by machines. Following the white rabbit of truth into our real world is far more desirable than the fictional world of the Matrix. We all potentially have the opportunity to choose between ignorance and truth. Pursuing truth can eventually reveal how we're self-imprisoning our consciousness, stifling our right-mindedness with an oppressive left-mindedness. However, it's not necessary to follow the white rabbit all the way down the hole to behave attractively around women. I'm not advocating that you immediately forsake your worldly possessions and attachments and find a meditation cave in the Himalayas. Even a 5% shift in the right direction can have a significant impact on your behavior and unlock some of your innate masculine attractiveness. And now we'll shift gears from fiction to real-life events, specifically to an event that happened in my life several years ago. It wasn't a moment of awakening in the Buddhist sense of the word, but a powerful transition that changed my psychology around women and dating. In essence, after a lifetime of chasing women with a deeply ingrained feeling of inadequacy, I finally awakened to the truth about my own masculine value. I'm a man of average looks, a pale complexion, and poor posture, which I still struggle with to this day. Up until the day I'm about to describe, I'd lived most of my life with a deep inferiority complex. This sense of inferiority was especially pernicious when it came to women I found attractive. I craved acceptance from attractive women. Even as late as my mid-30s, I was still striving to prove to the world and myself that I was a person of high value. Low confidence and low self-esteem were gradually replaced with a kind of fake it till you make it attitude. I could be bold. I could force myself to approach attractive women, initiate conversations, and go on dates. Sometimes I was even successful in sleeping with them or having a short relationship. But behind the curtain, there was always the lingering sense that I was an imposter. Deep down, I was still a scared, little, antisocial 11-year-old boy. In many ways, I wasn't dissimilar to the narrator in Fight Club. One day in Barcelona, however, the pretender finally let go of the struggle. The woman's name was Natalia. She was Russian, and she wore a black dress. I approached Natalia during the day on a sunny pedestrian boulevard in June. She was visibly confused. She spoke very little English, except to let me know that she was from Russia. Unfazed, I held strong eye contact and closed the physical distance between us to within a couple of feet. My flirtatious smirk and my body language were both on point. I was confident. Once Natalia understood what was happening, the sexual tension between us became quite intense. Had Morpheus been observing the simulation from beyond the Matrix, he would have said of my performance, "He is beginning to believe." Within a couple of minutes, I got her number and walked away from the encounter feeling like the man. I also fully accepted my chances of seeing this hot Russian again were slim at best. Experience had taught me never to expect too much from a phone number. Women can quite easily be caught up in the intensity of the moment, but then casually dismiss a man once her left-mindedness comes back online and the regular, everyday circumstances of her life take precedence. When I messaged her an hour or so later, she instantly replied, no doubt using Google Translate. I learned that she was returning to St. Petersburg the very next day. This is a very good sign for getting a date and potentially sleeping with the woman that same evening. When a woman is on holiday, alone, in an exotic, faraway city, and leaving the next morning, but is still taking the time to eagerly exchange messages. Nevertheless, the window of opportunity was very narrow. Had I met Natalia in St. Petersburg the week after, coping through her busy, everyday life, there would have been no such easy opportunity. I do not doubt that her regular, stressful city life involved fending off the local Russian men. Russian men are born masculine. Growing up, they face less societal emasculation compared to their more westerly cousins. I agonized over what to do. Rationally, I should message her and try to set up a date that evening. But I was resisting. By pushing for a date so quickly, I risked revealing to Natalia who I truly still felt I was, not the badass, Tyler-esque street seducer, but a pretender chasing feminine acceptance. And, not least, how on earth would we communicate and fill out the date? We had no common language, so I risked an even higher probability of humiliation. If she even agreed to the date, she'd probably just leave in boredom after a single drink. This was all egoic risk avoidance. My ruminations all came from an aversion to discovering one potential truth, that my magical pickup moment earlier that day was worthless and that I wasn't worthy of Natalia. So I stared at my phone, agonizing over what to do. I faced my own red pill, blue pill moment. Should I just congratulate myself on how awesome the approach was, not even attempt to set up the date, and try not to think about the squandered opportunity? Or should I grab truth by the horns? I took the red pill. I took right action. I decided I wanted to know what the truth would be. A few minutes after I sent my invite, she replied, asking where we would meet. In retrospect, with my years of experience since that day, I can't recall even a single moment when I regretted taking masculine right action. The regret is only with the action towards truth that I didn't take. The date that evening, the insight it gave me, follows in the next chapter. Chapter 13, The Woman in the Red Dress for Insight. How might we obtain new insights from the lofty spiritual goals of Buddhism to insights that support our more earthly desires? Similar to attempting to force the mind into submission during meditation, or seeking to convince or coerce a woman into bed, you cannot force insights to occur. They simply happen when your mind is ripe for positive mental disruption. My pre-date routine that day consisted of 3 rounds of Wim Hof breathing exercises, an hour of samatha meditation, a cold shower, and just before leaving, I watched my then all-time favorite movie speech on YouTube, The Wolf of Wall Street Inspirational Speech. After these important steps, I was ready for Natalia. Getting the mind primed for performance is a big deal. We had agreed to meet at the beach, at a small bar with chill-out music. The owners had made quite an effort to create a Buddha beach bar vibe. Natalia turned up, considerably late. Her tardiness had been agitating me, but I was able to let it go immediately when she arrived. The black dress from our earlier encounter that day had been replaced with a red dress. She wasn't dissimilar to Neo's red dress woman in the original Matrix movie. Her curvaceous figure was enhanced by the high heels she wore, which were completely inappropriate for the beach. She was stunning. After we embraced briefly in greeting, I led her to a pair of deck chairs in the sand. In my peripheral vision, heads turned, and there was an egoic swell of pride within me. I felt the tug of my left-mindedness wanting to steal away the moment, latch on to the ego glorification, and bask in it. Natalia and I amused ourselves by watching other people. We laughed at the occasional awkwardness of the communication barrier, and we attempted sign language to convey simple ideas. A few times we used Google Translate, but I resisted the temptation as much as possible. 2 people staring and poking at phones isn't conducive to a smooth romantic flow. As we sat sipping from the plastic cups of Chardonnay I'd ordered, an expansive sense of contentment, completion, and arousal asserted itself. We had no common language, so physicality was my only real option. After 20 minutes or so, I was already initiating hand-to-hand touch, but not too much. I knew that I needed to only occasionally allow the sexual tension between us to rise in intensity. With touching and nonverbal flirtation, and then relax into a comfortable, chilled-out silence. My job was to lead with a subtle rhythm of masculine tension on and comfortable release off. This raises a woman's body temperature, the degree to which the warmth of her feelings towards you at that moment will allow connection and intimacy to occur. After 45 minutes or so, we took a stroll along the shore, my favorite thing to do on a first date. Walking permits more freedom of movement than being locked into a chair. It allowed me to be more creative, improvisational with my flirtation. In addition, it meant heels off in the sand, which gave me a slight height advantage. I initiated more light touches on her hand and forearm. When I took her hand and made her do a simple spin, we laughed at the pseudo-dancing. Time slowed down, and we were now in a bubble of what were the first stages of the seduction. Her eyes sparkled, and she was loving every second of it. The lack of verbal communication had intensified our experience, making it mysterious and exciting. I then led her away from the sea along a wooden beach path towards my apartment. I'd been sure to make our initial date venue within reasonable walking distance of my apartment, with only the pleasant shoreline stroll separating the two locations. The 10-minute walk towards my apartment from that point felt like it passed in an instant. I was giddy with excitement and confidence that this was happening. I'd previously had many dates that had gone well, but not with this caliber of girl, and it was going better than expected. I hadn't even attempted to kiss her yet, because I felt there was no need. In the aftermath of kissing, the sexual tension a woman feels can reduce if you aren't already in the bedroom. As we arrived at the entrance to my apartment building, barely 90 minutes into our date, I was convinced the time was right to invite Natalia upstairs. I pointed to my balcony 2 stories above, attempting sign language to indicate that I wanted to go up and show her the view from the balcony. When she understood what I expected to happen, that we hadn't arrived at a social place but at my apartment, she gave me a stern look and shook her head firmly with an expression of disapproval. This refusal was jarring. My heart sank as I struggled to keep my expression neutral for a few seconds. Then I turned away from her, hiding a sudden flash of bitterness. Why did women always have to be so difficult? I knew we both wanted this, and yet here she was, wasting my time. She's just another fucking cock tease. Almost as quickly as the harsh negativity arose, it was quashed by the words of Fight Club's Tyler Durden, and my now favorite movie quote of all time in the scene where Tyler allows the car to drift out of control. Look at you. You're fucking pathetic. Stop trying to control everything and just let go. Let go. And let go I did. I was subtly equanimous. Resolutely, I firmly took hold of her hand and led her towards the nearby bars. I gestured that we were getting a drink, and this she accepted with ease. In refusing big things, people often make themselves easily accepting of lesser things. As we walked, I made a rapid mental reframe. I was spending time with an incredibly attractive Russian woman, 15 years younger than me. She was so much fun, despite the language barrier. By the beard of Zeus, why was I so determined to end this date prematurely? This was a beautiful and rare life experience of strangers connecting and should be cherished. The bar area was an excellent place to decompress from the tension. I even had the good fortune to meet some women I'd chatted to a few days previously. Natalia, of course, had no idea what we chatted about, only that my interaction with the women was fun and positive. This was a display of social proof on my part. Social proof is a psychological phenomenon wherein people copy the actions of others. By showing Natalia that other women enjoyed interacting with me, she had additional evidence of my sexual market value. There was no doubt also a hint of jealousy at play. After the wobble at the doorstep to my apartment, we were now firmly back on the rails. A couple of magical hours later, we were back at my apartment, this time without resistance. She had simply needed to experience all 3 acts of the show, rather than abruptly skipping the 2nd act and landing in the 3rd. While we men are often fixated on the destination, women have more appreciation for the entire journey. The red dress came off, revealing the body of a Russian goddess. Historically, this would have been a moment of maximum tension and dread for me, as I had frequently suffered from performance anxiety-induced erectile dysfunction. On this evening, however, I was in control, confident, and equanimous. I was rock hard as she surrendered to my desires. As Natalia left my Airbnb apartment in the early hours of the morning, and I bundled her into a taxi, a new awareness dawned on me. It was a moment of enlightenment, not in the sense of achieving a Buddhist enlightenment, but profound nonetheless. My psychology was permanently changed that evening. My existing paradigm was that if desirable women could love me, then I could accept myself. It was a craving for their affection and their approval that had persisted for my entire life, but miraculously, the craving was dissolved that night and has never returned. I now enjoy feminine affection and connection without the neediness. Women find needy behaviors in men a massive turnoff. It's a handicap I'm glad to be rid of. My new insight, my permanent psychological paradigm change, was that I was a high-value and attractive man. Unlike my existing paradigm, this realization required no external confirmation from women to support the belief. I was now internally validated. Known as insight in Buddhism, vipassana, these shifts in our intuitive relationship to conscious experience can arise for any of us at any time. It can happen when all the conflicting sub-minds of our subconscious suddenly unify around a new intuition about our perception of reality, often during an intense experience. After an insight occurs, the underlying intuitions that shape our conscious experience change to a new set of underlying intuitions about the world. This isn't the same as an intellectual insight. Intellectual understanding is only a shadow of authentic insight. We can logically understand that needy behaviors and craving approval from others is unattractive, but convincing your underlying psychology to truly believe these claims is another matter entirely. The depth of the subconscious and its myriad of sub-minds requires hard evidence from reality that these claims are true, not mere intellectual promises. Affirmations in front of the mirror about how attractive and deserving you are, or hypnosis, may bring some temporary relief, but there's no permanent shift. At the deep levels of your intuitive subconscious, the assumptions your mind has made about the world remain unchanged. What insights will you gain on your journey to actualizing your masculine potential? Will you let go of fear and embrace the non-self confidence to take right action? Will you drop self-judgment and allow authentic non-self expression to flow unhindered? Will you overcome your egoic reactivity with calm equanimity? You may experience all of these powers as you continue to practice and increase the strength and skill of your right-mindedness, but when will they mature from transitory states into permanent traits and beliefs of your psychology? When do they become effortless, not requiring consistent hours of meditation? We develop samatha, tranquility of the mind, which in turn is an optimal state of mind for achieving insight, known as vipassana. In Buddhism, the profound insights into the nature of reality include emptiness, shunyata, dependent origination, paticca, suffering, dukkha, and impermanence, anicca. The culminating insight of these realizations is the intuitive acceptance of non-self, anatta, that there's no need to allow our egoic self, our linear, binary-based left-mind operating system, to dominate and inhibit the expansive beauty and wholeness of our parallel processing right minds. Modern metaphors aside, this is known as enlightenment or awakening in Buddhism. So, how might we obtain new insights from the lofty spiritual goals of Buddhism to insights that support our more earthly desires? Similar to attempting to force the mind into submission during meditation, or seeking to convince or coerce a woman into bed, you cannot force insights to occur. They simply happen when they happen, when your mind is ripe for positive mental disruption. As Chuladasa states in The Mind Illuminated, awakening is an accident, but continued practice will make you accident-prone. The optimal path to becoming more accident-prone, more susceptible to these transformative insights, is to embrace two paths simultaneously. Courageously lean into your masculinity with right actions in the exterior world, and at the same time, continue to meditate with supreme diligence to strengthen and purify your interior world. The compound momentum of these practices for continuing this lifestyle of healthy habits over time and with savage intensity is the path to your masculine enlightenment and beyond. Finally, I will leave you with the powerful quote from the venerable Western meditation master Shinzen Yun, author of The Science of Enlightenment. It sums up the significance of walking the path, achieving mastery, and gaining profound insight. If I was given the choice of living one more day experiencing life the way I experience it, or living 20 more years as a wealthy, healthy, celebrity sexual athlete, beloved by everyone, but not experiencing what I experience, vis-a-vis enlightenment, the decision would be a no-brainer. I'd take the one day of enlightened living